Welcome to another GSL Middle Division game. Today we're going to be watching Underworld versus Goosedra. Joining me today is Dr. Shrew and Soulslaw on the cameras. Interestingly, I'm casting yet another game where the teams are one away from opposite ends of the division. So that's kind of neat.
Yeah, should be a good match. I'm excited to see where or how these two teams can play out against each other. I've seen Gooster play before, and they seem to be a team that can coordinate well and work together well. Excited to see how they match up against Underworld.
Yeah, on top of the fact that they played last week on stream and had very close games all around, despite losing out the set overall. So maybe we'll see something come of that this time around against a different team. Could have just been a bad matchup of players. Starting things off with the Terra ban and the Hachi ban. Those are, I think, pretty expected, but I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, pretty standard on both sides there. Terra and the Vamana are both two frontliners that you definitely don't want to deal with. They bring so much healing and sustain and shielding and just a lot of space creation. On the other side, focusing on that backline with the Hachi and the Circuit. Hachi's pretty much impossible to box in that dual lane, and Circuit can just bring so much initiation and setup as well as a lot of damage. So I like these bans out of both sides so far.
Is there anyone you're particularly expecting to see picked or banned here, aside from Martikaris here?
There's been a lot of focus on solo lane in a lot of divisions, a lot of games. So I imagine banning away, we're leaving all the solo laners open at the moment with that Nox ban. So I imagine both of these teams are going to be kind of prioritizing that solo lane presence. The Hercules is still available. Kukulkan's been seeing a bit more play. The Guan Yu is still available. And then you also have some more damage options like the Chang'e and the Hades that could come into play as well.
Speaking of potential solo laners, don't see it as much in recent Smite history, but Thor is being hovered. More likely the jungle pick, but we have seen it go both ways in the past in Smite. So curious to see how that'll turn out. Thor as the top pick, I think that's interesting, personally.
Hey, I like the Thor topic. He brings so much that semi-global presence that he can bring with the Anvil of Dawn. He's got the setup and the CC with his wall, and then he just has so much damage. The moment you tick over to that level 5 mark, you can apply pressure to any lane that you see fit.
Yemoja's fury.
On the other side, speaking of pressure, Yemoja is the lock-in.
And that Guan Yu's being hovered that you were talking about before as well.
Shall be written in legend.
That's a lot of sustain coming out of Goosedra so far. Yemoja brings so much lane pressure, but she has that sustain and that shielding with her 2, and then Guan Yu with that conviction heal, plus the initiation with a cavalry charge. It's a very strong frontline locked in so far.
Seeing an Ishtar hovered, she's fallen off just a bit from her prime after a couple nerfs recently. I personally still feel like she's a pretty strong ADC, and I don't think many people would disagree that she's at least a solid ADC. And I'm glad to see that she's still being thrown around as an idea, personally.
Yeah,
They will all
she can still bring a lot.
obey
They will
their
lock
goddess.
her in. It's interesting that, the ROM is still available, the Cernanos is still available. We've seen so much of them, but Ishtar can bring a lot of pressure, a lot of damage. She has those shotgun autos for late game to just absolutely melt people. So I definitely like the Ishtar lock-in, especially when you pair it with something like a Hercules to make sure that you, as Underworld, also have a very strong frontline locked in.
It's looking like a bit of chain CC potential versus a lot of water. Very wet comp coming out of Goosedra with the Hebo lock-in. Curious to see if with the sustain they have, they're going to target anything around being able to hold on to that. Doesn't look like anything specifically anti-heal is being banned out by them yet. But Agni, definitely a god that we've seen perform over the course of all of year 10 so far, really.
Yeah, Agni just brings so much damage with those bombs, and then you add in the CC that he has. Very strong pick out of the mid lane. And that Cernanos that I mentioned, that Underworld decided not to pick up, is going to get banned away, so they already have their ADC locked in for East, trying to take away some picks for Loki on the other side, and I like that ban away. Yanis has been seeing a lot of play as well, and that gets taken off the board by Goosedra.
I'm a little curious with the mage bans. Well, I am not going to continue that sentence. Never mind. I was going to say if with those mage bans, they're maybe trying to target the mid lane because they were planning on playing Hebo in mid, but it does not look like that's going to be the direction they're going to take. Interesting.
My power
Yeah, Hebwa is
cannot be
definitely a flex
contained.
pick, but I think he's much better in that jungle role, and especially compared to something like a Merlin, who's just I mean, he has more buttons than you, so he's always going to be able to output damage. And once you get to late game, it is so hard to burn objectives faster than Merlin. It's so hard to defend on a siege better than Merlin. He just brings so much to this Gooster squad.
And the particular thing that I think that they bring together as a specific combination is that you'll see a lot of talk sometimes when it comes to Merlin. Usually mid laners have big burst for securing objectives. Merlin's damage is mostly tick oriented. Hebo happens to bring not the biggest burst, but big enough burst that it's going to help you quite a bit in securing those objectives on top of the burn from Merlin and your ADC.
Yeah, it's a great combo out of the tomb. They were able to melt it down super quickly with the help of the Merlin, and then as you said, Habwa can use that ultimate crushing wave to secure it. And he could also use his 3, because sometimes they always used to call Hebwa the god of 3 ultimates, because water hands, water spout, and crushing wave sometimes all feel like they have the damage levels of an ult, so you'll have a lot more secure around these objectives.
I've even heard him called the god of 4 ultimates, while his, I call it the fruit roll-up, is definitely the weakest of his abilities in many situations. It is a fair amount of move speed once it gets leveled, and a pretty solid slow. So while it won't come up in every situation, there are definitely times where chasing or escaping, rolling that out is going to matter quite a bit.
Yeah, water carpet is the slow on it is so annoying to play against when you're trying to chase him down. Just like you said, just feels like you hit a wall, or it almost feels like a horrific was landed on you just the moment you're touching that carpet. Speaking of secure, it's the Scylla that's hovered for Underworld, which would definitely give them the advantage in that secure over the likes of Hebwa.
If anyone remembers Friday's game, we saw a Scylla perform incredibly well. Those ultimates can hit so hard if you're able to land them. Catch being, it does take a little bit of time. It's fairly reactable if they have an idea of where you're going. So not only do you have to be able to lead the shot, you have to be able to get into your opponent's head enough to know that they're not going to just walk away if they see you charging it.
Yeah, and Scylla, I mean, there's so much late game pressure on the side of Gooster between even just the Yamoja and the Merlin, and then you add in their other two. They have a great late game comp, but if the Scylla gets locked in, Underworld is bringing their own late game. Scylla, with her passive, gets so much stronger once she hits that level 20 mark, and all of those abilities have been like unlocked in their true form. Having Sikkim be a root and everything just makes it so hard to deal with. So she's gonna balance out some of the more early game pressure that you usually associate with the likes of Thor and Hercules. I think we will cut to a quick break as the lobby needs to be remade. We'll give the players a chance to hop back in here and then continue with game 1 between Underworld and Goosedra.
Apologies for the delay, but we are now back in the picks and bans. We now know that Scylla has been locked in. Waiting now on these last two picks, one from Underworld, of course, and then one from Goosedra. The Baron being locked in, likely as the support, although we could see Herc and Baron get swapped around a little bit. A bit of the shuffle in the lanes. That would be funny, and I'm all for the spicy picks.
Yeah, we've seen Herc in support a lot in the past, but recently he's kind of just been relegated to that solo lane. But Baron can do both, and Herc can do both as well. So I wouldn't mind seeing them switch.
Getting in my
would make it a bit fun to see a little bit of a mix-up of one we're used to. But with the ROM locked in for Goosedra, I mean, it looks like Goosedra just kind of went down the tier list and got exactly the top picks that they would want in almost every lane. It's just a very scary draft out of Goosedra.
It doesn't work in every meta, but with a comp like that, it certainly seems like it's going to as we make our way into the game shortly. Underworld here, definitely looking like an interesting comp to look at. They held on to that mentality of having just a ton of CC by locking in that Baron pick, I would say personally. Also, yeah. Tainted Steel coming out of the Hercules to deal with all of the healing that's being provided by the Emoja and the Guan Yu.
Yeah, it was a great starter pickup from Alfie there on the Hercules to make sure that there's anti-heal from minute 0 to deal with everything, especially since he's in lane against that Guan Yu. But going back to the Baron pick that you mentioned earlier, we haven't seen a whole lot of Baron in support as of late. But I don't feel like that means he can't be in that support role, especially with the Lono's Mask first item going into that prophetic is a good start for this character. We'll have to find out if he's able to bring what the Yemoja can, which is a hard ask in that support role.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to be as much, but if the gap is close enough, then not as much starts to not matter as much. Another thing we don't see a ton of, not that it's bad, it's certainly good, but usually we see Eye of the Jungle coming out of a lot of junglers, and we're seeing Bumbas here. Not the craziest thing, but not the most standardized one right now either.
It is an interesting choice. It might be more of a Hebois-specific pickup. If you go that Bumbas hammer, being able to weave your autos and the abilities could bring quite a bit of kind of bonus damage out of this Hebois once we get to the late game. We'll have to see if Cammy can pilot it well enough to make that happen.
Gonna see just a little bit happening, a stun that could have erupted if Lachi had been ready, but at this stage of the game, you're kind of just farming. Stuff like that only happens if it lines up perfectly, and well, it was just a little bit off of perfect.
Yeah, Yemoja Ram are almost always going to have pressure in this lane. Ishtar does have decent clear with those autos that we're seeing right now, but any lane that has Yemoja just pretty much innately has pressure, and then you add in the astral arrows that Ram can bring to the lane clear. It's just going to be constant aggression coming out of Goosedra in this early game.
See, my favorite thing about having a healer when I'm the support, because I am a support main myself, I love playing healers because I don't trust randoms, and I can just tell them that they're allowed to overextend. Looking like a potential gank is about to be searched for over in the duo lane by this Thor, so we're going to see if that plays out. these early level ganks, you don't have your ultimates online, but Thor does have another stun tool if you choose to go in. Instead, it's looking like he's going to back out and just go for the shield buff.
Looks like shield buff will be just the play. I like that, just making sure that you secure that extra XP for your side and not give it to the lane that will have all of that pressure. And he is around if something would have happened and he had a rotation ability, or a opportunity is the word I'm looking for as it escapes me, to make that gank. So I like the the pathing coming out of this Thor in the early game.
And then, of course, on the other side, we see the opposite silver buff get traded out, so the junglers are just kind of doing their thing in the jungle right now. Seems more like a bit of power farming going on. You know, you see that out of some of these junglers that don't necessarily have the craziest ganks pre-level 5. They'll just farm a little bit, and then once they come online, everything around them starts exploding very quickly. So once we get to that, a lot of things are going to be going on. But until then, well, things are going to be calm here in the early game. Looking like an attempt for a blue buff steal fairly early. Going to hit the wall from across the map wall, but it won't be enough, and they're just going to back out, as between the two walls, they're just not able to get there safely.
Yeah, blue buff invade attempted. I like that out of Underworld here, but not quite working out. That was a good rotation out of Cammy from Goosedra, knowing that there could be some aggression over there on that right side of the map. Just making sure that you help your support, or your solo laner, excuse me, pick up that buff. Over there in the dual lane, though, jumping back towards Order Mess on this Baron, he's been landing a lot of his roots, landing a lot of his heals, and if he can continue to do that and play this Baron to that level, then he does bring so much for your squad. The heal is just a little bit harder to land because you have to hit that ability on an enemy. But if he can continue to just, kind of play Baron to the highest possible potential, then I like this Baron pick more and more as we go on.
And I believe that heal also works if you hit minions. You can correct me if I'm wrong. After this little scrap occurs, it's looking like they've got the shield buff on Goosedra's side. We're almost down to East, but unfortunately, Kami is going to show up on the Hebo with that crushing wave, and it's going to snowball into a bit of a double kill.
A very good start here on that left side for Goosedra. Close between those two teams, but Goosedra the one coming out on top. That was a good rotation out of Cammy. Going back to your earlier question, I don't believe that it works if you landed on minions. I think it needs to hit a god in order to proc the heal. It just does the damage to the minions.
I'm not the biggest Baron fan in the world, personally, but definitely strong right now if played well, as we've seen. Able to largely nullify the difference in pressure once they're able to get to a safe spot, which helps when you're dealing with a lane with pseudo infinite health, like, well, any lane with a Yamoja or a Hell or an Afro. Those things can always be troubling to play against, and having even the slightest bit of an edge negating that is always going to be a nice thing to have around.
100%. You see good aggression from the Hercules here. Not quite enough to get the job done, but I like the aggression out of this because Guan Yu will be so much harder to deal with, but could be
Speaking of aggression, both junglers now in the area. Looking like the horse is gonna be ridden off into the sunset of the Hercules life. It is an unfortunate kill if you're on the side of Underworld, but of course, solo lane is definitely somewhere you want to have your players snowballing, so getting those kills rolling in favor of Shinigami is something you always, always, always want to see if you are Goosedra. We see here that the XP and gold differences are starting to grow, and that's gonna start to weigh on Underworld a little bit. Mental's really important in games like Smite.
Oh yeah, definitely, especially in sets like this where it's not just a best of one game. Mentals are something to keep an eye on to make sure that it's working out and you don't fall behind, not only in the game but like mentally at the same time. Looking forward to see what Rosie decides to build on this Scylla now that they've backed up. Looks like it will be the Doom Orb, which is an interesting decision on the Scylla. She is very safe, and so I like that additional movement speed. It's still a ton of power even after the nerfs. 130 in the early game is a lot, as well as that percent penetration. Not the biggest connoisseur of Scylla builds, but I don't hate this one.
Yeah, Doom Orb is a pretty solid item overall on a lot of mages. Looking like we're going to see the coffin closed on the Hebo, but the River's Rebuke is going to come out in an effort to dissuade this fight. It's not going to be enough as we see a kill come out onto Kami, and then one traded right back onto the Baron of Ordered Mess, and then everything left will disperse from there.
Support for jungle trade is always going to favor Underworld there, especially because Kami was 2-0-2. Won't be the biggest shutdown bonus, but a little extra gold in the pockets there for Freyr as he goes up into this Anvil of Dawn, searching for something over here on this right-hand side, but doesn't look like he's going to find anything he really wants, just opting to back out. But a good trade for Underworld there, who were falling a bit behind, so they at least get something to kind of help them stem the bleeding here in the early game.
I was looking for a second, like Thor was going to stick around near mid lane, wait for the Merlin to come back. It seems as though he's instead opted to invade the blue buff of Shinigami, and he will succeed and choose to not take any further engagements. Pretty safe choice.
Yeah, I like this constant kind of aggression over on the right side. You don't want a Guan Yu to get out of hand. It looks like he started off with that Caduceus Club as his first item pickup. And so he's going to be able to do a decent amount of damage as well as help sustain for his team with that choice there. But a rotation from Kami could spell trouble. Doesn't look like it will end up amounting to anything. But we do see quite a big rotation from a few members over to this side of the map.
Another fight's going to happen around another buff, seeing a lot of that, but it's looking like Goosedra wants to back out. Never mind, with 4 of them now here, suddenly left out in the cold is this Thor, but they're not going to commit after he hits a pretty solid wall. Instead, Lachi choosing to go back over, try and 1v1 the East, as in solo lane, Shinigami gets a kill. East goes down, Takami showing back up in lane once more. Ordered Mess now throwing out the coffin, catching Kami in the middle of it as Aaron shows up on the Thor to secure that kill. Big River's Rebuke coming out, but it doesn't look like a lot's going to come of that. Now choosing to play on the defensive. Both sides backing up, looking now potentially with Rosie showing up like maybe this fight's going to escalate, but instead all sides choose to remain safe. Now rotating back to the mid lane in the hopes of potentially saving this tower.
Was it good? Oh, he could get caught underneath this tower. Flicker is good enough, though, to make sure he doesn't die to that damage. I'm a monster, though, just off the mark. We need to be careful here. If you're Wolfie, he will make it back to the safety of his tower as an Anvil of Dawn lands in duo.
Suddenly looking very bad if you are Kakashi Kurama here, going down under the tower just out of range. Looking like that is going to be the last thing that happens before, again, backing off. A ton of just single kills, get outs. We've got what we came for, plenty of value. Over here in solo lane, we may see more of the same, but it looks like both solo laners seeming to choose to play a little more passively, wait for their waves. But now suddenly, with the Hebo of Kami approaching, things are about to get really bad if you are not careful. Suddenly trapped behind their wave on their tower line, but he is going to be able to get out with the dash. The Guan Yu able to reduce those protections. The massive play coming out of Kami. Huge crushing wave. Almost connects. Throws out the simple wave from the one to secure the kill in the end anyway. And another kill goes in favor of the Goosedra solo lane.
I was just about to say we might have seen the end of this Hercules spilling as regression onto the Ishtar of the East, but because he had gotten that breastplate of regrowth before, he just had that golden blade, so he was pretty squishy, but breastplate does nothing against what Kami brings with all that magical damage. So if Kami decides to continue to focus that side, could spell more trouble for Alfie, but on this left side, Ultimate's used, but it's just for a bit of poke.
Indeed. It's looking like both sides are preparing for a fight, but it seems like both want to avoid if they can. Seeing if that's an option, we're going to see a bit of poke coming out from the Emoja bubbles. But it's looking like we're going to see East back off as Ordered Mass covers the retreat. But might just run into this Hebo in the jungle, gets knocked up, but nothing will come of that, especially with the Thor right there. You've always got to be careful when high CC gods are around, high damage gods are around. Thor can be both if you're quick enough.
Oh, he definitely can. Speaking of Freyr on this Thor, it's an interesting build coming out of here in this early game. Transcendence into Soul Eater, as Pyromancer will get dropped very early. Power of the Merlin burn.
Too.
But Soul Eater is not something we've seen on junglers a whole lot recently. When I think of Soul Eater currently, I just kind of think of the Marticarus. Pairing it up, double stacking with that Transcendence is definitely slowing his early game down quite a bit. But it might give him that little bit of advantage come late game if he's able to sustain up while in these fights.
The ability lifesteal it affords you can be absolutely game-changing, especially when you have the damage that a Thor has, and suddenly things look really bad for Rosie as Cammy shows back up and gets the kill. Now Bigger's Rebuke coming out in an effort to kill Ordered Mess as Freyr shows up once more in the mid lane. Now looking like a 2v3 is going to be closed with a retreat after yet another safe kill. A lot of not overextending, I've been noticing. Very nice to see.
Yeah, Goosedra's playing very smart with these engagements, and they have this Merlin with all of that burn that we've talked about a few times now, and this Gold Fury's already down to half.
Will Ordered Mess step up to try and get the secure? He will, but he's going to be too late. Now caught out 1v5. Suddenly, East is there. Will it be enough? It doesn't look like it as Ordered Mess goes down to the Snipes. Now rolling out the Fruit Roll-Up, but it will not be enough to chase East down. Choosing to instead back off, rotating some of their members toward mid lane, which might end in a bit of a fight here for Rosie and Freyr. We'll have to see in just a second, but it looks like no one's going to run over their way as East ends up getting taken down, and it looks like the tower will also go down over here in the left side lane, thanks to the efforts of the remaining players from Goosedra.
It was a good all overall engagement from Goosedra. They got that Gold Fury, and they got a pick onto the support, and then that T1 tower. But I like what we saw out of Underworld in response. They knew they couldn't fight that anymore, so instead they go over to the right side of the map. They get a T1 tower for themselves, and they kind of strip that jungle, invading the red buff and the blue buff on that right side to at least try and get something on their side after losing that Fury.
As a form of pseudo-trade for this, though, over in the solo lane on right side, we did see Goosedra's first tower go down. So not the all-consuming, at least we got this, but hey, you had something, and that's better than nothing. Silver buff on right side going the way of Underworld as we now see a fight over purple buff that could develop very quickly, but it looks like East is going to make it to safety, choose to back up. Meanwhile, in solo lane, Freyr is now here, misses the max range wall just barely, still committing to the chase. That Thor has a lot of damage, but unfortunately the push, just gonna push Shinigami a little too far in the wrong direction. Now potential for a 3v2 favoring Goosedra as Wolf now gets Freyr. Thanks to the fire beam of the Merlin. Now stuck under tower is the Hercules, who is going to be backing, but likely losing that tower himself after getting the tier 1 on the opposite side.
That right there shows me how much trust Shinigami has in his team. He was in a 1v2, was lower level than the two of them, and like not in the best position, but turned around and started channeling that Talu Assault onto the Thor. And because he knew he had the rotation from both Kami and Wolfie on the way and trusted that they would get there in time to make sure that he won that fight. Didn't end up getting a kill, but as you said, they got the tower as River's Rebuke traps in 2 here in duo.
Back to duo lane we are with the supports and ADCs fighting, but now suddenly Shinigami showing up, reducing East's protections. There aren't many to begin with as an ADC. Down he goes, followed up immediately with the chase down to get Ordered Mess as well. Now Pyromancer also goes their way, but suddenly they may be caught out by Underworld if they're not careful. Anvil of Dawn comes out, hits the stun, and it will be the end for Wolfie on this attempt.
You're trading out your mid laner for a Pyromancer, 2 kills in duo, and a T2 tower in duo. Probably going to be worth it every day of the week. Unfortunate that Wolfie had to fall there, but they got so much in return, especially if they get a kill on
And they're going to get
Rosie.
even more out of that insane crushing wave. Oh my goodness.
Cammy has looked so good on this Habwa so far. 6, 2, and 4, well into the build already, and sitting at the top of the player damage charts. You can definitely see why Habwa has been prioritized and usually ends up being banned away in these matches. And Cammy showing exactly how strong this Habwa can be as the Gold Fury is started up by Goosedra.
And potentially looking to be stolen by Freyr, but he's going to show up too little too late by just a couple seconds. Same that happened to Ordered Mess just moments ago. Well, several moments ago, but moments ago. One thing that I find particularly interesting about certain picks, the Hebo being on that list, is I always like seeing picks that can be extremely flexible in the roles they can play. The more roles they can viably play in a meta, the better, because then things get confusing when you see them in draft. Sure, right now we're seeing a lot of the Hercules in solo and a lot of the Hebo in jungle, but when you have picks like that that can flex and metas that favor multiple of their roles, I'm going to hold this thought here as the Big Rivers Rebuke comes out, suddenly catching Ordered Mess out. Rosie opting to not go back in too far as Ordered Mess does manage to escape. But when you have those sorts of picks, it makes drafts really interesting because suddenly now you need to try and figure out, where is my opponent going to be putting that pick? Am I playing against a Hebo mid, a Hebo jungle? Should I be banning for mid or jungle? As we now see an attempt at the Fire Giant steal now that it's been pulled.
Quickly. He got
Barely gonna get the steal thanks to the I'm a Monster coming out of Rosie straight onto the Fire Giant. But Ordered Mess looking like he's not gonna be able to get out of there alive thanks to the focus of really the entire team. Now Rosie and Frey are able to hide under tower, but for how long with Shinigami running at them? Choosing now to back off, opting to potentially get the tower. Freyr just trying to poke, save as much as he can.
Oh, no.
Down goes the Emoja for Goosedra, but they are still going to get the tier 2 tower, and it looks like Cammy might just be able to get the one in mid lane as well, but suddenly Rosie showing up, looking like gonna play safe in response to the runaway with the fruit roll-up. Anvil of Dawn now suddenly out it goes, spin to win, wall to fall, teleport behind, and suddenly you've got a kill, as well as another one onto Wolf from Rosie. Mid laners clashing in the jungle.
Look at the spike back upwards in gold towards Underworld. That steal out of Rosie was insane, and it's what we were talking about on the desk. This is the best secure on the map, is that I'm a Monster coming out of the Scylla. And we saw it to the fullest extent there, being able to take that Fire Giant away. They did lose a tower in response, but they won the fight afterwards as well, and now it's their turn to siege, stepping up towards this tier 2 in mid.
Again, it's looking like we're going to see a lot of attempts at CC come out. East's going to be able to mesmerize just long enough to once again kill Goosedra's support, which is going to cause them to back off. I believe I saw the ult of Ordered Mess also come out. I may have misseen. A lot was flying around, but that is going to be a pretty solid follow-up to that Fire Giant steal. Now looking at Pyromancer.
Yeah, what was once almost a 6,000 gold lead in favor of Goosedra has dropped all the way down to 1,400. Underworld stealing that Fire Giant has led to them pulling themselves right back into this game, bringing us to almost a state of even, as just a little bit of annoyance coming out of Kami, not letting Ordered Mess back there. But that one play, one ability coming out of Rosie just allows them to get back into this game and have a chance to really do something here. Now they don't have to feel like they're on the back foot They are the ones who could step up towards this Oni Fury. They could step up towards the next Fire Giant if they wanted. They have the ability to kind of play on an even ground, which is a big boon for Underworld, who were starting to see the game slip away from them.
Levels also even across the board overall, although slightly in favor of Goosedra having the ADC level on their side versus the support level on Underworld's side, still relatively even as we see fighting start to potentially happen around Gold Fury. Just a bit of CC coming out, nothing major yet. Suddenly in goes Shinigami, his version of spin to win. And then the big River's Rebuke coming out of this Yamoja, only going to get a couple people in it. Not a lot of follow-up on it. Suddenly, the coffin will close on no one out of Ordered Mess. Now, looking at the actual Gold Fury pull itself. Can anyone from Underworld step up? Because it looks like that Fury's going to get burned. No, it looks like Goosedra's backing off. The Anvil of Dawn into the backline. Suddenly, you've lost your support. Massive, massive damage, but now solo laner gone for Underworld. Freyr now trying to escape. Ordered Mess trying to cover retreats. Will they be able to make it out? Horse is up, Horse is down, and down goes the Baron of Ordered along with it. East, 1 health left. Will he be able to get away? Wow. And suddenly, Rosie with the kill out of nowhere onto Shinigami, thanks to Scylla's incredible burst potential, as well as just some really, really well-timed positioning there.
Yeah, that was just Shinigami tunneling on East on that Ishtar, who was so low, just a sliver of HP was on their way out, and Shinigami didn't want to let that kill drop, did not know that Rosie was waiting in the wings there, got caught by that Sikkim Crush combo, just ends up falling. Another good engagement out of Underworld. They got the Oni Fury, so that those waves are marching down all 3 of the lanes at this moment. With Fire Giant coming up, could give them a little bit of a positional and vision advantage here in the pit, as those Oni waves will be need to be dealt with at some point.
Indeed, if they're not dealt with, they can actually do a lot of damage to structures, and in 2 of your lanes, those are Phoenixes. You do not want those taking a lot of damage. You also do not want your support taking a lot of damage before a fight has even begun, which has just transpired. Now, suddenly looking at a potential dive off the Hercules dash, but instead choosing to back out before a ton of damage is taken. Ordered Mess able to get most of that health back now. East now seeming to be left the lowest health on the side of Underworld, which doesn't matter as much if you're able to protect your backline. The Fire Giant is pulled as the front line trying to defend Goosedra away, but it's looking like some may slip through the cracks. This Fire Giant's now very low, but there's a lot of steal potential coming out as Lachi fires the ultimate, attempts to steal with the snipes, will fire them just a bit too early, and none of the steal efforts are going to pay off. Instead, Kami goes in but gets punished, ends up dying to East. Now, Goosedra left having to back off. Not going to be able to get Lachi out of there either. Shinigami trying to sustain self and team with those heals. But with a Thor in your backline, how much can you do? You can't save your mid laner, but you can get your tanks away. Likely, meaning we will see that snowball into a Phoenix take, especially with the entire team of Underworld still alive.
Yeah, just Shinigami and Kakashi here on the defense. The bird falls before they can even step up. And Underworld getting aggressive with their positioning. They might think they might be able to end here, starting to burn down the Titan. But Cavalry Charge might make them regret that, as Kakashi gets 1 kill. Teleport in from another member. Titan down to half, though.
3 seconds until Kami is back up. Can they hold it off in time? No, it looks like they can't. The Titan will go down in what looked to be a very solid game early in Goosedra's favor.
Yeah, it's just one fight, one mistake. They weren't able to secure that first Fire Giant, and the whole game just fell apart from that point on. Goosedra looked so strong for the majority of that game, but just unable to seal the deal thanks to a great play out of Rosie. And once Scylla got into that late game, we saw just how much damage that god can do.
Indeed, a few of those I'm a Monster ultimates definitely missed their mark, but the ones that hit were just massive. We saw them get kills, we saw them steal Fire Giant, And we also saw almost 12,000 damage come out, which I'm a little actually surprised
Oh my.
after some of the plays we saw come out of Rosie that he got out damaged by the solo laner. Not to downplay, of course, the impact that that damage had, but I expected it to be higher just with where exactly it was placed.
Yeah, it was just great overall team play coming out of Underworld to allow them to get that victory because that steal was important. But if you don't group up and play with that advantage that you get from the Fire Giant steal, it doesn't really amount to much. And they were able to group back up even from a behind position and kind of exert the pressure that that Fire Giant brings in order to get the job done. But on the other side, Goosedra, as we said, had a great game. Shinigami on that Guan Yu went 3-1-8. Did a lot of damage, set up so well for his team. It's not to say that Goosedra, because they lost game one, are on the back foot for this set. I feel like they know their game plan, and if they could just not get certain objectives stolen away and have a couple more team fights go in their favor, they very easily could take game two. Well, we'll have to find out what will happen in game two if Gustra can fight back and push us to a game three, or if Underworld will take the 2-0 and win the set when we come back in just a few moments here on the GSL.
They say that life's too short to be holding this tight. So why am I walking light? And in this world of light and color, I'm not afraid of the night. When this future's so bright, yeah, I got all these friends, and we're like, it's not the end. Whoa, this new world is ours. This new world is ours, and all these friends, and we're like, it's not the end. Whoa, this new world is ours. 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 They say the life's too short, and I can feel in my bones. The horizon is close now, and the world's been changing lately. But after the storm, we come out strong now. And I got all these friends, and we're like, it's not the end. Whoa, this new world is ours. This new world is ours, and all these
Here we are heading into game 2 after what looked like a decisive early game coming from Goosedra, but in the end a turnaround thanks to 2 very good follow-ups as well as a very good steal, all happening over at Fire Giant to favor Underworld. Into picks and bans for game 2, we're going to see the Marty get banned first. We saw him get banned, but it was, I believe, last in game 1, so bit of a different order, but then there we are seeing the Terra also get banned early. Doesn't look like a lot's going to change, but maybe Goosedra will ban some of those picks that worked a little too well against them in the late game.
Yeah, I feel like it would feel a little weird if you're Goosedra to ban away the Scylla. She's not necessarily one of those like top 5 mages, though she's close. But after the play from Rosie, I wouldn't hate to see that ban here in this 3rd slot for them. Underworld, no need to change your bans. It worked before, let it work again. They take away the Terra and Hachi just like before. It is Marticarus and Cirquet for Goosedra sticking to their plan, but they are the ones this time to ban away the Vamana. Underworld taking that one off the board last time, so maybe wanting to leave something different open since they have that first pick position this time.
See, I was going to ask before the ban came through if you think there's a possibility that they were going to ban Thor as soon as Freyr came online, those walls, those Anvils of Dawn, and both of those damaging abilities were just putting so much work in every fight that Freyr was around for. And so there was a possibility to go after it. It's not like Thor's a weaker character amongst the meta gods either. So there's not even any... Like you were saying, Scylla's harder to justify a ban on because she's on the lower end of the viable picks. But instead of banning it, it actually looks like they're going to do something that might just work out even better. And that's going to be to steal that Thor pick away.
Yeah, that was my thought process. If Cammy has Thor in the pool, then that is a very good first pick overall. And they can use it as a good first pick and as a 4th ban, as you mentioned, after what we saw from Freyr on that pick. Kami can provide similar things on this pick. It could work out for Goosedra and kind of help with some of the problems that they were having, because Anvil of Dawn is so good at disrupting those objective fights and even stealing things away, so they'll have that on their side. Underworld hovering this Ishtar again, though. It worked well for them in game 1. I mean, it didn't matter that they didn't have the Ram or the CERN or some of the more meta things. East looked very comfortable in this Ishtar pick, and if it worked before, why, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That kind of mentality. I like this pick from Underworld again.
Yeah, if you're not in a tier 0 meta, there's absolutely no reason to force yourself to conform to just that one or those 2 picks that are at the very top. And well, the closest we get to being in that are Hachiman and Marticarus, who are both banned anyway, so playing field ends up being pretty fair across the board for ADCs amongst the pool of playables. Speaking of the pool of playables, we see the Janus that we don't see the most amount of in Smite right now. Definitely a solid pick when played well. And then we're going to see on the opposite end of that, another mage hovered in the Agni and then locked in.
The Giannis is, I haven't seen a lot more kind of like I feel like he's growing in the meta right now, because he can just absolutely blow you up. If he lands that through space and time and then the unstable vortex right behind it, he will delete any squishy and can push getting close to kind of like one-shotting frontliners if you build him right. It is all about play on field though with him, because if you can't use those rotations to the best abilities, he doesn't quite bring as much as some of the more traditional mages. But if you can allow your team to rotate and get to objectives quickly or get to those side lanes quickly, he is a force to be reckoned with. We'll have to see how Rosie can pilot him.
And on the note of those flex picks that I was talking about loving so much, we actually have one that has recently seen a lot of flexibility in the Horus being locked in by Goosedra. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out throughout the rest of the draft. On the note of Warriors, Wukong being hovered. Very fun character. Has nothing to do with what I think of the draft. I just enjoy playing Wukong, although I am terrible at him. I expect a much better Wukong than my own, of course. But
Yeah, Wukong has been seeing a lot more play too, and it's an interesting build path that I've seen most times. Transcendence into Soul Eater, just a lot of damage coming out of the solo lane. You lose a bit of that frontline like presence, but he still has the Tiger Stun, the Bull knockup. He has mobility with the bird, the slow with his two, and Cudgel just does a lot of damage, so he can still help dive into the backline with the jungler of Underworld, even if he doesn't quite have the same sort of tankiness that some of these more traditional solo laners are going to bring.
Definitely a lot less CC than we saw come out of them in Game 1 as well. We still have the Ishtar, but not as much actable CC out of the Janus and Wukong as there was with Thor and Hercules. So we'll see how that shapes up. On the note of not wanting to deal with CC, we do see the Athena also getting banned out. So if they did want to go that route, that is one pick that can go a pretty long way, especially with those taunts. If they're too close together, you can catch 2, 3, sometimes even 4 of your opponents off guard with that. That was just never going to be good if you had that landed on a team that already started to struggle once the snowball started getting unraveled in Game 1.
Yeah, and it would just have been even more global presence as well. You pair the Defender of Olympus with the Through Space and Time from the Giannis, and that team would just be able to get anywhere at a moment's notice. So I like them taking that away. It's the Ganesh, though, locked in for support for Underworld. A good pick that we've been seeing quite a bit of in the past few weeks or so on this patch. The silence from Ohm is just so oppressive to gods like Horus and to Hercules. Very hard to deal with.
Hercules.
And then, Dharmic Pillars can just do a surprising amount of damage and trap you in a small area where Ishtar and Giannis can just free cast.
And on one more time, the note of those multi-role picks, we are going to see Hercules, likely meaning the Horus is going to support and the Herc to solo. So less fun for me, but still going to be very fun to watch. I love watching both of these characters. They're both really solid right now. We're going to see a lot of that semi-global presence you mentioned when the Thor was locked in Game 1, coming out of both the Thor and the Horus. And we're also looking at a very interesting hover for that ADC pick.
Death comes by night.
And a lot.
I love X-Ball. I think he brings so much right now. His ultimate being global does help, regardless if he's there at the fight. But he feels so good with the current itemization. That shred build works really well with him, can allow him to use his passive to his fullest extent. He's safe with that dash, giving him the CC immunity once it gets started up. And he brings a lot of pressure. Brainstein Bolas can just poke you out while he's just clearing the wave. So I think, especially paired with a Horse, there's a lot of kill potential in that dual lane for Goosedra. The only thing that worries me a little bit is they have drafted 4 physical gods, which will make defensive itemization much easier, especially if this Robin gets locked in, who can build a bit hybrid and still do a lot of damage. It'll be very easy for the Sun Wukong, the Ganesh, and the potential for Robin to build just a little bit of extra physical defense and be able to stand up to the damage that would come out of Thor and X-Ball.
And especially with it being for physical and not for magical, we've seen throughout Season 10 a lot more performance coming out of those physical protection items than their magical counterparts. We have, of course, seen magical protections do plenty. I mean, Shoguns, Oni Hunter's Garb, very powerful items in their own right, but nothing on the level that we saw out of Peak Contagion back in the day, which of course we don't have anymore, but Gladiator Shield always going to be strong on those tank picks. Stuff like that is all on the physical side, so 4 physical could end up hurting more than 4 magical might have in the same situation.
Yeah, the one thing it will do, though, is allow this Agni to do a little bit more damage if the frontline members of Underworld decide to build a little bit more physical heavy. This Agni will be able to eat through them because the burst that he will have is going to be even better if there's less magical protections on the side of Underworld. Say, the Ganesh starts with something like a Sovereignty. It'll allow Agni to do a little bit more damage until he can get something else online, which we could... I'm interested to see where they will take this build pathing against the 4 physical, but knowing how much Agni can do.
It will be something very interesting to see as the game gets underway. Those Agni ults as well. If you can get multiple of those on the same target, I mean, even if they have those magic protections, that's still going to be tons of damage coming out. When we start to see multiple, I like to call it a bit of a drone strike, because it's kind of what it feels like. You just see the skies start raining fire, and the next thing you know, he's got a double kill, and you didn't have a lot of time to react, and now you're behind in the fight. We're going to see exactly how that's going to play out, if we're going to see any of those drone strikes, or how that semi-global presence strong on the side of Goosedra is going to play out as we get into the game here. Starting things off, we see Sigil coming out of the Hercules. Pretty normal when you don't have Tainted Steel, I would say.
Yeah, there's not really any healing on the side of Underworld, so you're allowed to pick up that Warding Sigil. Once you can turn that into its upgraded forms, just brings so much tankiness to a god like Hercules. Still opting for that Golden Blade to make sure that his early game keeps up with what this Sun Wukong of Alfie will be able to bring. It looks like he is going to start that Transcendence route, which I do like. Opting for the beads, though, not the teleport. So if he gets poked out early by Shinigami on this Hercules, or maybe a rotation from Kami, might end up falling a little bit more behind, since he's not picking up that teleport.
Although Wukong does have a lot of mobility with that bird form to circumvent that lack of teleport, it is, of course, still going to be just a bit slower, like you were saying, and so, yeah, that is indeed a thing of note. We also see the Tainted Steel come out because, well, Hercules has kind of crazy sustain, and, of course, Horus healing is nothing to sneeze at itself. That is just an item that probably helps a lot. Although if things go very, very strangely, it theoretically may not. But more likely than not, 99 out of 100 times, that pick is going to do a lot of work, especially when we start getting into the late game, when we start seeing the supports and solo laners clash with one another.
100%. A bit of aggression in the mid lane, just poking between these two squads. We were talking about what sort of defensive items we might see early here with the 4 physical as trouble for Shinigami as he backs up under his tower. It looks like Gauntlet of Thieves, though, will be the call for Ordered Mess, wanting to get some of that magical protection online before heading into more physical later.
Thieves from both supports, actually, very interestingly. We've seen a lot of Prophetic Cloak, especially on supports, over the course of Season 10, and it's looking like we're going to break the mold completely here with both supports going into Thieves. We could see that Prophetic Cloak get built second. Not likely, but certainly not off the table. Lot of chasing coming out of Kakashi, but all for nothing in the end. Gets chased away himself.
I don't feel like either of these supports stack Prophetic fairly easily. Neither one of them have big AoE abilities to easily get their stacks on early. Could be aggression, though, on this Ishtar.
But it looks like East is going to be able to get away. Yep, but sticking just barely in range of those pokes from Lachi. You need to be really careful, although a lot of that health now back, thanks to the careful play, not getting the W key mindset, but looking like a dash coming out, but the silence is going to meet it. You are right about that. Now suddenly things look a little more even over in the duo lane. Solo lane now suddenly looking really bad for Shinigami as he goes down to Freyr, showing up at just the right time. A couple seconds later, and that may have been an escape for Shinigami.
Yeah, I like the rotation coming out of Freyr there to make sure that this Sun Wukong has a good time, make sure that he's able to get ahead, especially going this more damage-orientated start. It's easy to fall behind and then really start to struggle, so making sure that your solo laner who's going that more aggressive start gets a good lead will allow him to snowball and just do that surprising amount of damage, even getting the blue buff away from Shinigami.
Completely undetected. What's not undetected is the scrap happening in duo lane. Suddenly, Kakashi's got a lot of CC and a lot
Oh,
of damage onto
man.
East, but East is going to get away. Not if Kami has anything to say about it. The wall goes down, and the kill is closed. And to trade things off somewhat evenly, this purple buff now looking to be stolen by Goosedra, and it is done successfully.
They used a frenzy there, which I didn't even realize Kakashi had picked up as that first relic, and that to me says exactly what we saw there. Aggression is the name of the game from Goosedra. They did so good in the early game in game 1, and then had it taken away, they might just be thinking, well, if we can just build a bigger lead, make it even more oppressive for us, it'll be harder for them to step up and try to turn that game around. So getting frenzy first relic to just make sure that wherever Kakashi goes on this horse, aggression is sure to follow.
You know what's funny?
What?
You went Frenzy. On the opposite side, we have Emblem. Dead opposite relics on opposite sides. I always like seeing stuff like that. My brain just enjoys patterns.
And yeah, it makes sense with the gods too, right? Horus is such an aggressive support, brings so much damage and CC, and Ganesh is very much that peel-orientated support who reacts to things with that silence, with that root. So I think it's good relic picks up for both of them, as we see Kakashi still just walking at 2 members without a fear.
Make that 3 as suddenly he's going to be forced to back up, but it might be a little too late. Indeed, it is for him. Lachi didn't overcommit and is now going to be able to back up, although that through space and time almost went very poorly for him. Speaking of things going poorly, barely not going to get the kill thanks to the beads coming out of that Wukong pick. Those beads help you a lot in some situations in these really early fights.
They really do, and the more I think about it, the more I think that, you know, going beads when you have a more damage-centric build, even if you are the Sun Wukong who is a warrior, is a good call because of that exact thing that happened right there. That rotation from Kami probably would have spelled his death had he gone the more traditional teleport route for his first relic.
Bit of a chase happening in the jungle, but both of them are going to peel off. Now seeing a teammate, Kami, looks at a chance to go back in, try and unsteal the buff. That's not going to happen, but now suddenly it's a 2v1, 3v1, although the first fireball will be missed, as will the second. Now, a lot of people showing up, the silence coming out to be pretty big, and that will be the last straw. Now seeing both tanks collapse on their location. They do not want to pick that fight. They've gotten what they wanted, and that's to get out alive.
That was unbelievably good peel coming out of Ordered Mess there. The Dharmic Pillars was positioned perfectly, and then the silence and the body blocks just allowed Freyr to get out of a situation where he was trapped between 4 members. Not often are you going to live when you're stuck in that sort of moment, but Ordered Mess very comfortable and confident on that. Ganesh gets his jungler out after stealing away that blue buff.
And the last Fireside mid-harpies go down, which means Pyromancer will be coming up soon enough. Perhaps we'll see our first objective fight happen there. What's not an objective is the mid lane jungle. We're seeing a fight as the through space and time goes across space and time to catch Wolfie off guard. But Kami's going to be able to trade back Rosie, now throwing out the Anvil of Dawn as an escape option. Able to get away just barely, now leaving Kakashi there to defend mid lane on fairly low health. Looks like it's also going to cost them their side's red buff as well. Never a great position to be in coming out of something like that.
The Bastion stopped Wolfie's dash. They would have been able to get out of there, maybe would have been able to like walk safely under the tower, but unfortunately dashed right into the Bastion. His Shinigami's in a lot of trouble on this right side. Will make it safely out. But the Bastion completely stopped his momentum, and then he got body blocked by it. An unfortunate positional, no, I wouldn't even say mistake, because he was just flicking to try and get out of there. The Bastion being there just spelled his death. If this wasn't season 10, those wouldn't have been there, and he probably would have lived.
Indeed, a bit of scrapping and a bit of damage onto the ADCs, but not a lot happening there. Looks like potential consideration around the Gold Fury. Definitely no commitment to it, as we're going to see to this tower dive that is not going to pay off in the end. East, though, left on fairly low HP. Can Ordered Mess turn this around? Suddenly, looks like we're going to see Freyr and Rosie both make their way over, but now they're going to have to fight under the tier 1 tower of Goosedra.
That was close. Through space and time, almost nearly clipping him. Might have actually hit him there. But he's able to get out safely. That Gold Fury is up. We're 8 minutes into this game, which would have been an early Gold Fury, a call by either of these squads. Could have seen it though, but with that through space and time getting used to try and find the kill, it seems like they're going to opt instead just to try and steal away some of the farm of this Goosedra side.
Indeed, as we see a wall come out and whiff, but tons of damage still to come out of that Thor, just not enough to close the kill. Anvil Dawn is up. Looking like just a quick teleport in,
Dead
walk
though.
out, but it won't be enough to get out of the tower. Just too far into the tower line by just a maybe half second. And unfortunately, that is going to result in a trade, although it did work out pretty well in helping to alleviate some of the pressure that's been coming out. We've seen East pushed up almost every time that we've gone over to that dual lane this game. Is in the solo lane, Shinigami manages to get that kill. Those early game kills will go a long way in helping to snowball that early game if they're able to get into a position like last game, although not as close just yet. Suddenly a fight over purple buff between the ADCs. Not a lot of direct damage onto each other. The focus from both sides is to get this buff. It is going to go the way of East, who is then going to back out and choose to claim their prize later. Or suddenly, Ordered Mess might need to be defended a little bit with some of that poke that Ishtar has available, but both sides able to get away from that as well.
Through space and time expended there. An interesting call. Don't necessarily know what Rosie was going for as we hop into a quick pause here. Taking a look while we have the chance at some of these builds, it is going to be a little bit of that hybrid style coming out of Freyr, going for that Transcendence first item before hopping into a Berserkers in that second slot, making him a little bit tankier against the majority of this Goosedra squad. I like that decision coming out of him, since Robin, used to be a warrior before he was transitioned into that assassin role, so he's always kind of had that slightly tanky feel to him. It never feels bad to build something like Berserkers on him.
That is information that predates me. Also seeing what looks to be the CAD Club being built by Kakashi here, so that Horus healing going to get amped a bit pretty early on. Always nice to see when you're looking to sustain in some of these fights. Even if they're shorter fights, you can win them just off of those small bits of sustain, and then in the longer fights, of course, when you see them come up multiple times, they're going to matter about as much as that wall did, which is going to result in a tower dive kill onto East. I didn't expect that to just escalate so quickly, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, Anvil Dawn and To the Skies used, they used a lot to get that kill, but it's setting them up towards this Gold Fury. Goosedra know about it and are present. But it doesn't look like they'll be able to step up as so much damage goes onto Shinigami. Hopping up into the cloud, but he doesn't quite have the reach for it. Looks like Shinigami might be able to make it out if this Tiger Stun doesn't land. He will get the kill though with the cudgel, a turnaround solo kill for this Sun Wukong.
Meanwhile, in mid lane, a lot of damage coming out onto Kakashi. Thankfully, that Gauntlet of Thebes does give you a lot of protections early, and Underworld is choosing to back off and what looks like a shot at Pyromancer instead of chasing a kill under a tower. Will there be any contesting this coming out of the side of Goosedra? It looks like there will be. Fireball 1, Fireball 2, not enough, but they will get the steal off the back of Kakashi running in there for it. Looks like he might go down. Indeed, he does. Through space and time also burned, but it doesn't look like anything is going to happen to Wolfie there.
That is a little glimpse of what we're going to be able to see out of Rosie on this Giannis, using that through space and time almost as a shotgun ult, and then coming straight out of it with the unstable vortex. Just will blow anybody up once they have just a couple more items online right now, just with that Chronos pendant into what should be a Spear of Desolation. But get used to that sight. because that is something we're going to see more and more the longer we get into this game, and it's just going to be even more damage every time.
It also could potentially be a Divine Ruin if looking to answer. Well, never mind. I was going to say if you're looking to specifically answer the amount of healing that they have on the other side, but Spear of Desolation with those cooldown partial resets, just a fantastic item right now. So nice feeling to have, and it makes everything flow so much better in those longer fights. We keep talking about longer fights. They do happen late game, and we saw what some things can do among the list of things we've talked about last game. You know, hitting multiple stuns when you have a lot of those, getting a lot of healing during those longer fights, getting those resets if a fight goes on long enough that someone is able to respawn, which isn't the most common thing, but it certainly happens, especially around late game fire giants. That will always help you keep them cycling, which will keep you in an advantage. We're going to head away for just a moment here as we're dealing with a minor trinket. Stay tuned.
Say that life's too short to be holding this tight. So why am I walking light? And in this world of light and color, I'm not afraid of the night. When this future's so bright, yeah, I got all these friends and we're like, it's not the end. Whoa, this new world is ours. This new world is ours, and all these friends, and we're like, it's not the end. Whoa, this new world is ours. This new world is ours. This new world is ours. They say the life's too short, and I can feel in my bones. The horizon is close now, and the world's been changing lately. But after the storm, we come out strong now. And I got all these friends, and we're like, it's not the end. Whoa, this new world is ours. This new world is ours, and all these friends, and we're like, it's not the end. Whoa.
We are now back with the game as we come back to an absolute bonk onto Shinigami coming out of the Wukong Mat Cudgel. It's just a funny animation to me. He makes this big log and just whacks you with it. And it's just, I love it. It's one of those abilities that I love looking at so much. It's so simple, but it's just funny to me. It's right up my humor. It's just big stick, bonk.
Unga Bunga indeed coming out of the Sun Wukong, especially with all this damage that he has already. That Transcendence is stacked. That Soul Eater getting close to stacking. I imagine we see a Glad Shield coming out afterwards as what he's building in towards. If he gets into the backline once these Soul Laners start rotating into these fights, he's going to be able to do significant damage to the likes of Wolfie or Loki on these carries of Goosedra. It's going to be something for them to have to keep an eye out. They're both fairly safe gods and can help peel for each other with the stuns that Wolfie can bring. But if he's allowed to just kind of position where he wants in this fight, it could spell trouble later on down the line.
I would also like to point out the fact that we see Agni dual-wielding spears, building both Spear of the Magus and Spear of Desolation. It's one of those things. It's like seeing Emblem going up against the belt. I just love seeing things like that. My brain loves patterns. You've got the opposite relics. You've got the dual-wielding spears. Although, honestly, Spear of Desolation looks more like a knife in its image.
Yeah, I've never. I guess when the gods build these items, are they wearing all of them? Like wearing multiple breastplates at the same time, holding like three, four
They
different weapons for a carry?
they on top of the one they're already holding, mind you.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
they did a thing on the art show for one of the update shows recently where it was a challenge where they had artists submit art of the gods they play wearing the builds that they normally build on them. And some of that, I mean, all of the art was fantastic. Artists are like so amazing, and seeing some of the specific ones were just really funny. Specifically, I think I saw one that was breastplate of regrowth with prophetic cloak over it, and then
Huh.
holding the mage Healy stick. There's two Healy sticks, and I just call them the Healy sticks, and I never remember their names. I know one's rejuvenating heart. The old one's the one I'm thinking of.
Um, I know that item. Rod of
Right.
Asclepius.
Yes, thank you. I was about to say physical CAD club. I don't. I have only actually been actively playing Smite since December, so I'm still getting
Oh
into the
wow.
groove of everything. But I love seeing just anything like that, and like you were saying, picturing just what does it look like? Because what do you do if you see Ishtar running at you, holding 5 bows at once, shooting all of them simultaneously? Like, what do you do? I don't care that you're Zeus. You're still scared.
I guess it does a good job of portraying the fact that these are all gods and legends and myths because they're capable of holding 5 bows at one time, or you know, wielding 4 spears, whatever they end up having to build. It shows that they're not just humans that we're watching down there fighting. This is the battleground of the gods.
And this guy with a fancy sword.
Yeah.
Um,
Like we will be hopping back into the game. Hopefully, these players have made it back into the lobby successfully. We see a bit of a grouping and rotation towards this left side of the map. Once again, Kakashi getting aggressive over here near dual lane.
Indeed, and everyone on the side of Underworld is also going to know, because even if they were for some reason not calling that they were getting jumped on, or their teammates weren't paying attention to the map, well, there is a ward, and you do hear a sound when enemies pass over those. So, plenty of attention now going to be focused near the Fury, but enough attention will be focused on the tier 1 on right side. As this fight starts to ramp up, we see Kakashi in the backline of Underworld just throwing out tons of CC, but then the pillars go up. The boxing ring is out, but so is Freyr by the hands of Kami, and it looks like that loss is going to be enough to back off pretty heavily, but not entirely for Underworld. Now starting to pull the Fury on Goosedra's side. East really looking for a potential steal, but not going in for it. But now the Fury's suddenly very low. Goostra is going to secure it, but now the entirety of Underworld has arrived. Kami left running on his own, going to get jumped onto by the Wukong, but he's going to be able to get away with the wall, but not for long between Bird and Cudgel. The chase and damage potential is a lot, but not enough, as he barely gets away with what looks like maybe even double-digit HP.
Yeah, Alfie didn't rotate to that Gold Fury fight for quite a while, opting to get that tier 1 tower instead, and it cost him the Fury. To do get that tower, he was successfully able to do that, but he did clear a wave even after getting it before having to get back in, as Two the Skies is used just as a little bit of a protection for Locky there. But this Wukong has the potential to do so much damage, as we've been mentioning, but he has to show up for that to happen. He has to be in these fights, as we could see trouble for Freyr as well.
Over here near the fire giant, bit of a scrap. The cudgel goes out, bonk onto Kami. Not the most damage in a single ability, unlike the firebomb coming out of Wolfie, looking like not a lot of results. Now back in mid lane, we're going to see the mid laners fight, but neither of them choosing to step up particularly immediately. Bit of a scrap over Totem, but it looks like that's going to be conceded to Alfie as Shinigami committed just a little bit too late. Now with that a tower to back into easily, he's going to have to take this fight or commit to running all the way away. He is going to commit to running, and Alfie will let that slide this time.
Rush rate of regrowth just gives him so much movement speed to get away from Sun Wukong, who would have had to commit quite a bit more to try and chase that out. There's about a level and a half difference over there in the solo lane in favor of Alfie on this Sun Wukong, but Hercules is going to do Hercules things regardless of what level he's at. Just the push-pull combo is always going to set up for his squad. As long as he's tanky enough to survive for just a little bit to set up for his team, he's still going to be able to bring things, as a rotation from Kami over here could spell trouble for Alfie.
Indeed, as that setup potential may come in handy with all of the damage that comes out of a Thor. But it looks like he's not going to live long enough to get any of that set up. But Alfie's going to miss the jump onto him, and it looks like he's going to go down to Wolfie. And that's going to be the backing away from his teammates as well.
A bit of over-aggression from Alfie. He knew he had his team on the way, but they were a ways out and decided to still up down with that ult. Now the fight around this Pyromancer is kickstarting. Beads out from Rosie as well as the Aegis to try and get out here.
Two juked ultimates out of Wolfie. Those firebombs are able to be thrown out multiple at a time, but if they miss, they still miss. And it's going to look like that will lead to everyone getting out of that one.
Frenzy popped for this Pyromancer here. It is just Freyr who's unable to secure that wall off the mark, so he'll be able to walk away safely here. A good objective play out of Goosedra so far in this game. They are a little bit behind in gold still, but getting that Pyromancer will help things out. And they have good potential for the secure with those Agni bombs, which will help them with further objective fights. But they take that tier 1 tower to try and get this game closer back to even.
Fury will also be up in a matter of seconds, so there is potential to see some fights happen there, and up it comes out of the ground. So looking like maybe Goosedra might want to set up for that, as they do have a couple members in the area, but so do Underworld. Potentially going to see a bit of damage come onto that tower if Underworld attack. They will not be making any quick efforts while it is left alone with the support. So still, low health is going to be pretty easy to pressure, and that Fury now suddenly starting to get grouped around by Underworld.
Both squads definitely should be aware that it's up. We see solo laners are on this side of the map as well, which usually indicates the want to get that objective. Before this fight starts, we can take a quick chance to look at a couple builds. Staff of Mirrodin not quite picked up, but I might not have a chance to talk about it as Shinigami is CC'd.
Plenty of it as well. Speaking of CC, big silence, but then the wall into a counter mesmerize. No one's able to follow up on that wall if they're all stunned themselves.
Invalidon getting charged up.
Looking to take it underneath the Fury, diving onto two people, one of which is Ordered, going to be able to get out and throw up those pillars. Now suddenly left on low HP. Rosie, Ordered, and East. East, the first one to lose that HP. Ordered, not able to escape either. Alfie, low health. Rosie, low health. Freyr, low health. But they are able to turn it around onto Shinigami thanks to the efforts of Alfie. Those solo laners, they don't know how to stop boxing each other, do they? Over the wall, I believe, goes Kami, and with the wall goes one more kill his way.
Use
Now
the
on
Fury available for Goosedra. They're starting to burn it quickly, but Alfie is here, gets stunned out by the Agni, and will get zoned away by Kakashi. Fury does go the way of Goosedra, which puts them in the lead for this game, and might be even more if they can get this kill onto the Wukong, though he's so safe with that bull form, able to make it out, and now could spell trouble. And it is Freyr getting a kill onto Loki, and now it's just about escaping for the remaining members of Goosedra. Seems like they should be able to make it out. Kami low health bars, but has that hammer to get out if needed, though he throws it aggressively. That was brave, but it won't end up costing him.
Almost as brave as Wolfie trying to steal back the XP from that Cyclops camp, but just a little bit too late with the fireball from the sky there. So not going to be able to save that one, but one camp at this point in the game is, well, it matters, but it's not the most massively impactful thing. So you don't feel as bad about losing that as you do about if you had lost Gold Fury. That would not have felt good.
Yeah, I would trade Gold Fury for a camp of back harpies most of the time. I feel like that's a good trade if you're Goosedra.
Most of the time. You know what else is good most of the time? Anvil of Dawn. Unfortunately there, it's going to get portaled away from. Pillars come out in an attempt to save himself out of Ordered, and it looks like that is going to be enough. Will it be enough to secure their security for this Pyromancer take? It will not, as most of Underworld is now here, and suddenly the fight's more even than it looked like it was. If you want this Pyromancer, you have to fight for it, but they're not going to, and it's going to go the way of Underworld for completely free on what looked like a free Pyromancer from Goosedra.
It did. That was just good space creation coming out of Freyr on the Raven, who lived through a lot of that damage and just made sure that Goosedra didn't feel comfortable enough to try and burn down that Pyromancer until the rest of his squad showed up. Even turned around quite a bit of damage himself to allow them to get that. This Staff of Mirrodin has been picked up, but every time I try to mention it, a fight happens and Loki will get deleted by the two members of Underworld there. But Staff of Mirrodin just feels so good on Giannis, which is why I've been wanting to mention it. You get that cooldown, so he's now at the cap of 40% CDR. But when you use that ultimate, which is a lot of times how Rosie's going to be starting this fight, you just get so much increased damage, as well as the item having quite a bit on its own with 105 magical power and 8% penetration. It's just such a good pick onto a god like Giannis, who's going to start the fight off with that through space and time, come through it themselves, and then just absolutely slap you with that unstable vortex.
Could you imagine how much better the item would be if it actually did have 8% mitigation? Speaking of Staff of Mirrodin, I don't either. Speaking of Staff of Mirrodin, it's actually looking like it's getting built into by Wolfie as well. So, pretty interesting. I don't think we see that a lot on Agni, really, at any level of Smite. We do see a lot of fireballs coming out of Agni and hitting Ordered. Wolfie able to land those pretty cleanly. Rosie low HP, gonna portal away again. Anvil of Dawn comes out from Kami. Gonna land in, hit the wall, hit the spin, and take out Ordered Mess. Or with those auto attack cancels, you cannot underestimate the damage that he deals. What you also can't underestimate is the escape of a Wukong not able to deal enough damage just yet. And so Alfie will be able to escape, but now looking at the Fire Giant.
Yeah, we're 24 minutes in. They have a frenzy. They have enough burn, and they are starting this up. And look where Shinigami is. He is zoning so far away from the pit. I don't think Underworld's going to be able to get anywhere near it, and they won't. Goosedra get the first Fire Giant of game 2.
And Freyr in a lot of trouble. Able to use that leap to get away as Alfie shows back up once again. Cudgel goes out, does a bit of damage, and pulls enough attention away that if anyone had a chance to chase Freyr down, it wasn't going to end up happening today. East doing a bit of science. Can I solo the Gold Fury yet? I do it all the time in ADC myself. Usually the answer is no, but when you're full build, absolutely. But not quite there yet.
Yeah, when it's a crit meta, it's so much easier to just solo objectives when you're the ADC, but when it's this shred kind of pen build, it's a lot harder to burst it down all on your own. So forced to back up there. That leaves this right side open for Goosedra to take away the T1 and now the T2 before deciding to back and spend up that gold.
They might not have a lot of time to spend it, though, as 2 of their own Tier 2 towers are under threat right now. But knowing that the enemy have backed, Underworld deciding to back off of those 2 Tier 2s. Although Shinigami looks like he's been caught out very deep in the enemy jungle, he's going to need to use a lot of what he has to get away, but that speed and dash are not enough even together, going down in the end to Freyr and Alfie.
Through space and time was used just for an escape tool. For a moment, I forgot what sides were which. Rosie was deep in the backline stealing away camps, but could be paying for it with the life of Kakashi. Rosie will get that kill there. It almost seemed like they flipped sides for a moment. It completely threw my brain off that the Giannis was ulting back towards the right side.
Kakashi was up there on top, and then the rest of them were, and I was just like, okay. Interestingly, Shinigami got caught out there, wasn't able to back in time with everyone else. Kakashi just kind of walked up. And that is a very unfortunate death to have. You know, to just walk in and think, I can place a ward, I can be the ward. Whatever the thought process was, it didn't work, and you had, what, 3-4 people, and suddenly you end up gone for a minute.
Yeah, and especially when you have that fire giant buff, they got both of the towers in solo, but then after that, it's almost seemed like it's Underworld who are the ones aggressing, the ones stepping up towards the opposing side of the jungle. Pyromancer would be helpful though for Goosedra to continue their sieging attempts with one of those runic bombs. They will drop it, but opt for the fight instead of picking it back up.
The spheres did come out in an attempt to steal by Rosie, those orbs just being fantastic damage if they land. Good secure as a backup, but didn't end up working out, and Alfie just chose to go in a little too late to get that Pyromancer steal, and so ended up with both of them backing off, although Rosie now aggressing onto the cooldown camp. XP and gold are still XP and gold, although the buff largely irrelevant. Still, no one's really full build yet, and you want to make sure that you're the team getting there first.
100%, especially with this next fire giant just around the corner, about 20 seconds until it respawns. Both of these squads have every opportunity to fight over this one, as we are pretty much even here. Just a few hundred gold separating these two squads. 238. Yeah, you couldn't get much closer than this here at the 28-minute mark. But I want to see Goosedra try to step up and get aggressive here. They got the last one, weren't able to do exactly what they wanted with it. You don't want to give this next fire giant up to Underworld. We saw what happened in the game one if Underworld is allowed to have fire giant around their waist.
Kakashi extremely aggressive once again, this time able to get out both times that he does it. Able to be almost full health. I'm not gonna lie, I personally was hoping that East was gonna accidentally shoot Fire Giant after it spawned there. Kakashi getting aggressive once again with the knock up to, I think, 2 people. Ult coming out of Locky is gonna force a little bit of backtracking for Underworld as Goosedra take this time to regroup. Your ADC is low, and that is your main way of shredding the objective if you want to be the one to initiate that, so you have to play carefully around that. You also can just try and throw out a ton of CC and see what sticks. Unfortunately, the answer is going to be none of it. The Herculink and the Thorwall.
From East.
Yes, and that is always, always, always going to be good to have, because that means the next wall that connects to East, the next yeet from Hercules that hits East, will connect. You cannot get out of it. It's also really hard to get out of being surrounded by 5 people, but it looks like it's going to happen. The pillars go down. The ultimate out of the Ishtar of East goes down, and it does lead to the kill on Kakashi. That aggression, once again, leads to Kakashi's downfall, although this time it was more the aftermaths of it than the aggression itself. But these things do last from one fight to another. Ooh, wait a minute. We're not done yet. Wolfie looking for the steal here. Not alone either. Looking like he's going to have to use his ultimate for himself.
He
Not
got
going to
it.
get a lot of damage, but he does get a lot of damage on the Fire Giant, securing it in a very similar turn of events to what we saw in Game 1, the other way around now. Well, other way around for the team, same way around on the map.
Yeah, just a great steal out of Wolfie allows them to get that Fire Giant, which is enhanced. Now, it's only around the belt of Shinigami and Wolfie. Everybody else, unfortunately, was still gray screened as that was dropped. You still have it around the waist too, and more importantly, you took it away from Underworld. It seemed like they were winning that poke battle, winning those fights, and would have had what was an enhanced Fire Giant that had just ticked over. But you take that away, and if nothing else, you've extended this game by another 3 or 4 minutes, not allowing Underworld to feel completely comfortable on this siege.
It is always, always, always better to have something and waste it than give it to your opponent every time if you can help it.
100%. And that's exactly what they've done. They still might be the ones who need to defend on this siege, but the fact that Wolfie has this enhanced Fire Giant is going to give him so much extra damage and survivability in these fights. And Agni already good on the siege defense with those bombs and his easy access to wave clear from a distance, as well as the poke. So it should make it rather hard for Underworld if they want to step up towards this Phoenix, which it seems like that's exactly what they want to do, but nobody from Goosedra's back there to defend it.
They are valuing that tier 2 tower in mid lane a bit more. If they're able to take it and the Phoenix quickly enough, this play might just be worth it, and I think that's what they're thinking. Now forcing Kakashi to tank it. Oh, Shinigami was there to at least punish the aftermath, which should and does guarantee that Phoenix. A lot of aggression coming out of the Titan. A lot of damage. Anvil of Dawn as well. The wall comes out. This is not going to be the end of the game, but it does force anyone who was thinking about staying out, trying to push another lane to back. Suddenly, here comes Alfie, the ultimate coming out of Kakashi, and away we go. Are we there yet? The answer is yes, unless your name's Kami. You'll be there in a minute, my friend.
Unfortunately, he wasn't able to hop in that too. The skies sort of bus away from the rest of the team. He will end up falling. But that's just an overall interesting call out of Goosedra. They completely decide they don't want to defend. They lose the most important Phoenix, that left side one being so hard to defend when the Fire Giant's up. They get the mid one in return, which I like that call once you're in that situation. But stepping into the Titan room, even with Shinigami trying to stop the backs of most of the members of Underworld, always going to be risky. Ends up costing Kami his life, and kind of gives them bad positioning around this next Fire Giant when it spawns here in the next 44 minutes. It's going to allow Underworld to kind of get the vision advantage. We can see so many wards around that XP camp on the Goosedra side of the map. So it's going to be a bit more of an uphill battle around this next Fire Giant dance.
Indeed. Maybe this Fire Giant will be the one where we see someone accidentally aggro it. I want to see it, man. That's all I'm saying. We do
My favorite
see a
thing
bit
is
of...
when the Fire Giant comes out. Originally, it can knock you back because it comes out of the wall now. If you're standing there when it happens, it caught me off guard the first time that happened to me.
I didn't even know that it did that because I've never seen someone be in the pit while that happens. And Kakashi positioning really aggressively once again. It seems to have worked out fairly poorly a fair few times this game. There's that accidental Fire Giant pull that I've been waiting for.
Alfie, though, falling. That was so much damage out of Locky.
Alfie. Yeah. Plenty of damage from the Fire Giant as well, coming out onto Goosedra, though. That sixth teammate during that fight. Anvil of Dawn coming out, going into the mid lane. Ends up not being necessary for killing Freyr, as the rest of the team has things handled and Locky gets the last hit. But had things gone a little differently, that Anvil of Dawn would likely have secured that kill for them. Now,
That's
like
two very big picks for Gooster, though, as they back up towards this EFG. Both the jungle and the solo being gone, that's a lot of their damage and a lot of their kind of space creation taken off the board. This Ganesh from Ordered Mess trying to get in to try and maybe steal that with a Dharmic Pillars. Can he get it? But no, Goosedra will secure that EFG for them once again. Just backs coming through, spinned up that gold, and get ready for what should be a first proper siege of the game.
We also saw Shinigami and Kami consider going after Ordered Mess, but deciding to not commit to it at all in the end. Would have been an interesting fight to see, but it would have just been, you know, smacking a tank, getting silenced, and then the tank running away. Yeah. Probably wouldn't have gone very well. Probably the correct call, but the less funny one.
We see builds getting finished up from multiple members on both sides here. So much damage coming out of Alfie. He's just got that Stone of Binding and that Glad Shield really for the defense. The Tainted upgrade will also help him out, but he's mostly built to just kind of blow up the back line of this Gooster squad. But when it comes to siege defense, if he gets jumped on, if he has any sort of problems, he's not going to be able to live long against the damage that Locky and Wolfie are going to be able to put out as they make their way down towards this left side Phoenix.
And it looks like things got rough for Alfie very quickly, having to burn that ultimate. Speaking of ultimates and burning, Wolfie landing some pretty nice hits as the Phoenix goes down. The Anvil of Dawn once again coming out. Tons and tons and tons of damage going in the way of Underworld. Rosie managing to get that kill onto Locky, but now suddenly caught out. But everyone is silenced. No one can throw out abilities to secure the kill. Kami going down next thanks to Freyr's efforts. Rosie looking for something on the side to pick off as the team backs away on the side of Goosedra. Everyone alive, just looking to do what they can to get out of there. The tanks making sure to stay behind, try and keep Wolfie alive in case they do have to fight. And it looks like they may just have to. Suddenly, Rosie's health looking very unfortunate, but Kakashi caught out alone. Wolfie and Shinigami on their own. Kakashi's going to go down before Rosie, so all of that ended up being for very little. Through space and time used, juked just barely by Wolfie. Now back at base. Not an easy defense, not an impossible one, especially with Rosie being one tap from really anything, even out of Shinigami. The pillars come out, the boxing ring is up. Nobody wants to tag in except for Shinigami, who will make an attempt in the front lines.
Locky's
but
back.
It's going to cost Wolfie his life. Locky now steps up against everyone. Now 1v4 as Shinigami went back to heal. Isn't going to get those kills, but is going to set up the potential for Alfie to go down, which it looks like is going to happen. What a turnaround of a turnaround.
What? Yeah, that fight went on for an eternity. We started with the siege of the left side Phoenix of Underworld. That bird goes down, and they fought and chased all the way down the left side of the map, the longest lane. They made it all the way through into the Phoenix on the side of Goosedra, where that Phoenix ends up falling. Good plays across the board from both sides to get those birds. But in the end, you kind of feel that went the way of Underworld, as they were the aggressors for the majority of that time. Though those fire minions in left will crash and kind of even each other out, as this next fire giant is due to respawn in just around 20 seconds. Kind of has the feeling that this could be the fire giant that decides the game, with one Phoenix being down on both sides. Would be an easy task for either team that picks up this all-important buff to walk into the Titan room after just getting rid of one more Phoenix and taking game 2.
Kakashi with that signature aggression, this time joined by Shinigami in said aggression. A little bit behind him, but looking at that aggression, dashing in and getting bonked, now choosing to try to opt out of that fight, healing himself back up just a bit. That CAD club amping those heals enough that you get so much value out of that. And if you're on someone that took damage on their way here from like clearing a camp or something, then it's healing for them as well. It's one of the many things that makes Horus a strong and fun god, in my opinion.
100%. He brings so much to these fights. Kakashi is using that very well as a lot of damage gets put onto East, forced to beats and Aegis and will make it out. But meanwhile, damage coming back onto the side of Goosedra. Low health bar for Cammy, who's forced to back up, but he's a Thor with a good amount of mobility. Should be able to back and get back into this fight relatively quickly. We've ticked over to the 40-minute mark, making this Fire Giant so important because late game, one mistake can cost you everything. So both teams are going to want to be very cautious and meticulous about how they do this. And if Alfie ends up falling, that could be problematic. Does make it up onto the cloud in time. Horrific and Dharmic pillars burned, but Cammy will get a kill onto Ordered Mess, which could spell the go button for them stepping up towards this Fire Giant.
Suddenly, everything looks a lot more in Goostra's favor. If this goes their way, there is a high likelihood we go to Game 3 in just a couple minutes, however long it takes them to close this push. They are leashing the Fire Giant. It is already at 1 HP. Will the secure come out? It will not. Goostra, now at 40 minutes with a Phoenix about to go down to Wave, has that enhanced Fire Giant. It's going to make pushing so much easier. We see the backdoor, though, on the other side of the map coming out of East. That is something you have to be careful of, and it actually looks like, yes, that is going to be a Phoenix down for Underworld. Now, things aren't looking as good as they could, but Locky getting the kill. Anvil of Dawn onto Alfie. Here's those long fights that outlive respawn timers I was talking about. Yeah. Alfie now low HP once again, burning the ultimate once again, but will get away this time.
Phoenix does go down. That was good from East to get that, but because that ADC wasn't there, they lost 3 in that fight. The mid-bird on the other side will go down as well, and with still long respawn timers could spell trouble. Goostra feeling confident step into this Titan room to try and win game 2.
Tommy feels real confident to just stand in those pillars for the entire duration, as they're now attacking the Titan, the only one immediately in there being Ordered Mess, and he's not going to be able to do enough to stop their attack. Once again, just things happened way quicker than I was expecting. It looked like the Titan was going down slow, and then it just went. Very unfortunate for this Underworld roster for this game.
Got a game 3 ahead of us, baby. It's going to be a good one. That was it was a 42-minute game. But it felt like it was pretty back and forth through the entire time, and then a series of just long, extended, slightly strange fights over there in the dual lane and around that Fire Giant pit, with East doing the split push thing, just ends up costing them the game because they lost the fight in the pit while East wasn't there, and it just opened the door just enough that Goostra felt like they had the potential to step into that Titan room after getting the mid Phoenix, excuse me. And they were right. I mean, they were able to just walk in, melt that Titan, and win game 2 to extend the set.
And I can understand where the line of thinking came from to have a split push there. I mean, had the fight not gone south as hard as it did, that Phoenix being open does make that defense a lot harder, especially if they show up as a wave of minion spawns, because now you're dealing with those fire minions being as strong as they are on top of the Phoenix, the enemy team. Your waves aren't going to last long. You're not going to last long, and things would look a lot better. But then the Fire Giant fight goes poorly, and suddenly you're now trying to play catch up on a defense where you're already playing from behind, even in a 5v5.
Yeah, very hard from Underworld to try and do anything on that last defense. For game 3, my eyes are still on East on this Ishtar. 47,000 damage on this pick. Looked very good on it in games 1 and 2. And if I am Goostra, because that game was so close, it was not a convincing stomp out of them, I would be worried about allowing East to have it in the all-important game 3 if you wanted to try and take this set, which I can guarantee that Goostra does.
Yeah, it seems pretty likely. My question is, what do you think they trade out from what they've been banning so far for that pick? Or do you think they're just going to counterpick it with something?
I feel like if you're gonna, they've been banning away the Marticaris, the Vamana, and the Terra, if I'm correct in remembering. You could probably leave the Terra open. It's a great support pick, but it's not necessarily Backbreaking? I don't know. That is a hard question because there's just so many good picks out there. It's hard to try and figure out what to ban. And when you need to start respect banning, you leave open some of the real kind of intense picks that are out there that you don't want to get taken away. We'll have to see what Goosedra decide to do with their bans, I guess.
Indeed. One thing I personally really like seeing out of Gooster that we saw in both games 1 and 2 so far is relatively even ward numbers across the board.
Yeah, where's that in my ranked games?
Yeah,
Good
same
vision.
here. It's better vision than my eyes, anyway.
Yeah.
I do
Well-
believe we are going to head to a break while we get things set up for game 3 here, though. So hopefully that's going to be as good of a game as these first two have been. I'm looking forward to it.
They say that life's too short to be holding this tight. So why am I walking light? And in this world of light and color, I'm not afraid of the night. When this future's so bright. Yeah, I got all these friends and we're like, it's not the end. Whoa, this new world is ours. This new world is ours, and all these friends, and we're like, it's
And we are back with an all-important Game 3 between Underworld and Goosedra here in the middle division. It's been a very close set so far. Both teams obviously getting one win apiece. But within the games, they've been very back and forth. Neither team getting a clear advantage with the exception of a few points in the early game. So I'm excited to see how this plays out and who will take the set win between these two squads. Bans so far the same as always in this set. Marticarus taken away by Underworld with Goosedra getting rid of that Circuit.
And down goes the Terra as well. Same bans, different order. One thing that I want to touch on, since we're not going to see anything new in the ban phase, we saw, especially in that game too, a lot of aggression coming out of Kakashi on that Horus. And we talked about how that aggression is really helpful when it works, but I do think he needs to be a bit more careful with it, or that the team needs to be a bit quicker when he's looking for stuff. We did see earlier in that game
I will spread night
that
across this
backfired
battlefield.
really, really hard. Although we are going to see, I gotta get a hold of myself here, because we're going to see a swap. Thor ban, Nox pick. Opposite of what we've seen for those two gods so far today.
Seems like the Thor out of Cammy and out of Freya was enough for Goosedra to decide that they don't want that pick out there, knowing that it would probably get taken in that first slot. But that does leave the Nox through. As you mentioned, we've seen that banned away consistently in this set, and Nox is just so annoying and so hard to deal with in that support role. And you love your flex picks. There is a world, I suppose, where Rosie can take this Nox into the mid lane, though I do imagine this will be a support Nox.
Behold,
It does seem likely. One thing about characters being annoying to play against is, we've touched a couple times during this set on how important mental can be. Characters that are particularly frustrating to play against are never good to play against for your mental. Some people don't find the same characters frustrating as others. Traditionally, Nox is seen as one of those frustrating picks. So if no one on Goosedra cares about that, good for them. But if they fall under the category of, I don't like playing against Nox, suddenly every time that Nox pick does something to you, starts to wear just that little bit more on your mental. And now we're in game 3, where even though Goostra's coming off the back of their own win, we are still going to see mentals get worn, as game 3 always harder on you than the first two games are.
Definitely. Goosedra picking up this Sun Wukong and the Yamoja. Very standard for what we've seen, but this Yu Huang pick coming out of Underworld for Rosie, something we haven't seen prioritized at all so far this set. Wasn't banned in any of the games, wasn't picked in any of these games, but it seems like in a game 3 scenario, a must-win scenario, be a bit of a comfort pick for Rosie. And Yu Huang's a very safe god, very, very good at self-peel with the root on the 2, and then the self-banish of the 3 makes it so hard to deal with this mage and try to lock him down, especially with dueling dragons being able to push people away and deal an insane amount of damage. I like this pick coming for Rosie in the mid lane. Just it caught me a little off guard with that lock, and it might have caught Goosedra off guard as well.
A bit off guard to see locked in, but not as much as the Yu Huang, is the Bakasura pick. We have seen a lot of Bakasura seeing play just generally at any high level of Smite, as that pick can just do a ton of damage as the game goes, at the cost of sacrificing a fair bit of early game. Although early game in this current meta, not the biggest thing you're focusing on, unless you're building and playing a comp purely around snowballing, but it is currently some of the hardest that it's ever been to do. Seeing the Herc, Agni, and a Wheelix bans, followed by a Merlin. So a lot of targeting toward Goostra's mid lane coming out of Underworld here, whereas we have a bit of spreading around one ban for each of the roles that seem to be absent from Underworld coming out of Goosedra.
Yeah, and if this Heimdall gets locked in, I think that's a really good pick here in this game. Heimdall has been seeing a little bit more play at the highest levels at SPL. We've seen quite a bit more of Heimdall coming out. He's so safe with that crystal. He's got the knock up with the Galar Horn, and then just being able to send someone to Niflheim, take them out of the fight, and either use it to get that
fires
kill,
of
or to just
Muspelheim!
basically make a team fight a 5v4 in your favor for those few moments is very impactful. And that will be the lock-in here. We're seeing picks coming out of the woodwork, though, that we haven't seen all set so far. The Bakasura, the
Ooh.
Yuhong, the Heimdall, and a Hades
The
hover.
Hades.
Could
Your
be
soul is
interesting. It
mine.
will be the lock-in. Alfie sticking with that damage mindset in the solo lane.
Obviously, this is Nox solo and Hades support. No. Hades is Hades is a very solid pick in solo lane. It's a lot of pressure, of course, coming out of a full damage pick. Although into a Wukong, that's not gonna actually. Now that I think about it, I'm correcting myself. That's not gonna matter as much in the very early stages of the game, due to Wukong's current build path. But as a general thing, Hades has a lot of damage and pressure over a lot of solo laners, and he does maintain quite a bit of that over Wukong, especially into the late game. But it will be slightly mitigated by the fact that another early game damage build is going to be your competition in the solo lane.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see which can get the upper hand with the mostly damage focused builds that I imagine Shinigami and Alfie will both be heading towards. But Freyr locks in this Mercury pick for the jungle. And I'm going to be honest, I don't feel like Mercury is in the best spot right now. After the changes to Spectral, making crit not very viable because of how strong Spectral armor is right now, giving that aura of crit protection and even increasing the power of the god wearing it once they get crit, it's very hard to fight into. Mercury, not a god that can build any way except for crit, at least as far as I've seen since he, since as long as I can remember in Smite. It's going to be interesting to figure out if he can kind of work his way around the Spectral and still get some good damage in. He's got good setup with that ultimate and the 3, but it's going to be hard if Spectral's picked up by not only this Umoja, but maybe even we see the Sun Wukong pick it up. And I've seen some junglers who go up against Mercury's just pick up that Spectral armor to make the 1v1 so much easier.
And then rounding out the roster for Goosedra, there's no place like home is what they're saying, locking in the Baba Yaga. Interesting mid lane matchup, I would say.
Yeah, both very, very safe picks. Yu Huang, as I mentioned already, has a lot of self-peel tools and that self-banish. But on the other side, Baba Yaga just almost has some tankiness with the build path we see mostly used out of her. Wolfie could opt to go for that Prophetic Cloak third item, which is so easy to stack with the Baba Yaga passive. And then you have Home Sweet Home, which gives you that shielding and the knockback when you hit it. It's so hard to just shred through how tanky Baba Yaga can get while still turning around so much damage with that artillery mage playstyle.
One thing that we're also seeing is no massive, not that there's no potential for it, but no massive chain CC potential like we have seen on one side of the board every game so far. So that could be interesting. We have seen that CC strung together so far this set, and without as much potential to do that, I am wondering if that's going to massively change the outcome of how some of these fights are paced.
It definitely could. Both of these supports are the kind of main forms of CCs for both of these teams. Yamoja with the Riptides to knock you back towards the team, the stun from the one, and River's Rebuke being able to lock you in place. And on the other side, Nox having that silence and the root just being so annoying. And something that we haven't mentioned about the Nox is the changes to her ultimate recently, giving her that 10% damage reduction on anybody she hits. Makes it harder to fight into her and will make it harder to fight into the rest of the team. So it could be something to watch out for if somebody like this Heimdall all of a sudden is doing 10% less damage. Could be just the window needed for someone like the Mercury or this X-Ball to get their damage in and win that fight.
One thing I think is of note as well for frontlining in the late game, Hades does struggle to do that if his ultimate is down, so they're going to have to pick their 5v5s very carefully late game, if at all possible, on the Underworld side of the map as a result of this pick.
Yeah, Hades kind of brings that mentality of who needs to tank if the entire team is already dead. He does so much damage, has that one-shot potential on the carries, and is mobile enough with his dash to be able to get into the back line. Kind of doesn't bring the frontline presence that we're used to out of solo lane, but just absolutely blows up the carries. So as we mentioned, with how safe Wolfie is, it could be hard to do that onto the Baba Yaga.
We are now going to head into the game 3 of the set. Winner takes all here. 1-2-1.
Yeah,
Looking pretty standard out of both sides, seeing the Sigil come out of Shinigami, the Shroud out of the Hades of Alfie. Not expecting enough lifesteal to be a problem to come out of Alfie to warrant going Tainted Steel this time.
Yeah, that's an interesting call to opt for the Warding Sigil. It feels really good on Wukong to have that Warding Sigil to kind of counterbalance how much damage items have been being built on him. So I like that pickup. But Hades should have quite a bit of lifesteal in the build as we progress further. But you can always pick up things like the Contagion, like the Pestilence, the Cursed Ankh if you really want it. There's lots of options to mitigate the sort of self-sustain that Alfie will have. But my eyes are drawn to the fact that this Vampiric Shroud, not just for Alfie on the Hades, but for this Yu Huang piloted by Rosie. I think Vampiric Shroud is in a great spot right now, even in the mid lane. It gives 35 power at level 1, which just feels really good, but it's not something we see too often because of the MP5 and the cooldown reduction that Sands of Time brings, path that Wolfie's has opted to go for.
And we're not seeing it in this game, but the gem start gives you insane clear if you just want crazy pressure, or maybe you're playing a god whose clear isn't as good, and so that will also block that Shroud from appearing as much as well. Mid lane starter items just in a really strong spot right now. ADC starter items also in a pretty good spot, but seeing Death's Toll out of both of them so far.
We've seen quite the shift away from the Leather Cowl into this Death's Toll. We saw a lot of people going Leader's Cowl at that level 20 mark, but Death's Embrace just brings so much extra damage with the basic attacks, and that extra sustain, especially when paired with Devos, makes it harder for people to dive onto these ADCs, makes them just that much safer. Kind of seen a lot of shifting towards this Death Toll, and I like seeing it out of both of these builds. I feel like X-Ball and Heim do work very well with that starter item.
Yeah, that early sustain plus the ability to just gain 35% DPS out of nowhere late game. Just an incredibly strong combination to have on the same item. It's definitely something that feels good to have, and we've seen in practice that it just works wonders right now. ADC is also one of the roles in the more prime positions to succeed at the moment in Smite, so even better when your starter items are strong. We're also going to see the Mask come out of the Nox, as is standard for most mage supports, because those mitigations are going to go really crazy, and once that gets leveled up, once Ordered hits level 15, that's going to be a massive aura coming out of that Mask. It's 35, well, it's 7 protections per stack, and at max stacks, it's 35 protections in an aura around you. And as we know, those orders go a long way when you're dealing with people who can actually just burst you down the way that a Yu Huang or any ADC can. Almost a bit of a scrap in solo lane. Nothing to come of it just yet, though.
Yeah, just solo laners doing that solo lane thing of pillow fighting, though I guess pillow fighting probably won't be the word for it with this matchup. Both should be building into quite a bit of damage, so we could see some spells later on. Yeah, there's pillows somehow really hurt this game. But with the silence and the fear that can come out of Alfie, it might give him a bit of an upper hand. Not really anything channeling from Shinigami to get interrupted, but still will make it hard to fight in, as it's low health bars for East. That was almost a kill for Yamoja, but a blue buff successfully invaded.
Ooh, speaking of almost a kill for the Yamoja of Kakashi, that was maybe a few frames away from going very, very poorly. Now looking like Kami just choosing to steal that red buff, even if you're not able to put it to use. Same thing as with the Fire Giant last game, but on a much smaller scale. You having it and never picking it up is much, much better than letting them have it, because they'll get value out of it if they pick it up.
Yeah, the XP is what's really important there, and the gold that comes from those camps, taking that away from East on this X ball and making sure he feels a little less comfortable over there in that dual lane. It was a trading of buffs. We saw Kami take away that purple buff on the left-hand side, where Freyr went over to the right side and made sure to get that blue buff away from the Sun Wukong of Shinigami. So it seems like these junglers could be focusing out different lanes here in this match, which we'll have to be keep an eye on to see which sort of path, which sort of direction ends up working out better.
Bit of a grab coming out of the Nox, nothing to follow up on that with. Now in mid lane, things looking just a little bit spicy, but Yu Huang, like we were saying, one of the safest gods in the game, able to just get away by leaping into the air.
You can see, even without the lifesteal items beyond Vampiric Shroud, it doesn't ever look like Alfie has taken any damage, because he heals back up to completely full after each wave, which is so hard to fight into if you're Shinigami. Sun Wukong has a fair amount of sustain with the ultimate, especially once he gets that Soul Eater online, but until that moment, it's just so much sustain coming out of Alfie that's almost impossible to fight into.
And not only is it that Vampiric Shroud, but the explosion, the 3, that also does a ton of healing if you're able to hit the entire wave while they're marked, which we see him do there. The silence/fear of the 2 marks everyone, and then you can just fire that, take a couple steps forward, blow the wave up, and suddenly you've healed. Even at level 1, that's what, 120 health per wave?
Yeah, the innate healing within the Hades kit coming out of the Devourer Souls ability is just so hard to deal with. But we see a rotation here. Excuse me, that is just the Heimdall hopping back into lane. There is a rotation though coming behind him. Could be trouble.
The ultimate puts them in the dark, but they know and see too much. River's Rebuke comes out to wall in East, and the first blood will go the way of Kami with the assistance of his duo lane.
Yeah, they used Regurgitate and the River's Rebuke there to get that kill, making it worth it in the end, especially because East thought he could get out with that Darkest Night ultimate, but unable to do so, falling there for first blood. Is the start that Goosedra want. They want to see this game start to head in their favor and try to continue the momentum that they built up after winning game 2.
On the note of Hades' healing, I do want to mention, it won't come up very frequently, but his healing does also happen to not just himself, but any allies within the specified radius of the exploding targets. So that could, in fringe situations in team fights, come up later. We may see that little bit of healing that comes out of that. Well, it's a lot more at level 5, but we may see the healing that comes out of that matter a fair amount late game, or we might see it not come up at all. Really kind of depends.
It's one of those small things that, not a lot of people know about it, and it never, it hardly ever is like a big impactful moment where you get like saved by a Hades heal. But as you said, it does happen, and even if you don't notice it, it can lead to saving your life. But the good stun forces the beads out from Rosie. Regurgitate thrown out, but the minions won't be enough on their own. Should be safe for the Yu Huang. Good Merc ult though to continue this fight in the mid lane.
But unfortunately, Rosie and Order just not feeling confident enough with those health bars to step up. So Freyr just opting to get off of the mid lane as soon as he knows his teammates are safe, and instead returning to farming. Mercury is definitely one of those picks that you just want to hit your personal late game as quickly as possible, because that's where you truly come alive. Bakasura as well, but in conjunction with some of the power plays that we've seen, such as that massive River's Rebuke just a couple minutes ago in the duo lane, you can come online a bit quicker, and Mercury doesn't have as much instant capitalizing potential as early as Bakasura might.
Yeah, Bakasura...
Bit of an ult coming out of the Hades here of Alfie, and it will lead to the kill on Shinigami. Looked like he was going to take a bit of damage, but again, the heals on that 3, the lifesteal off of Vampiric Shroud, they just keep you alive for so long. And it was just a little bit too much of an investment by Shinigami. although his buff will be secured by Freyr. Or I'm sorry, no, that's Alfie's. I'm looking on the wrong side of the map again.
Bruised Rebuke locks in 2 members over here, but sent to Niflheim is the support of Ordered Mess, which is left east on his own, forced to use the beads, but will safely make it back towards his tower. Meanwhile, Home Sweet Home turning around damage over here in the solo lane, an early rotation from Wolfie, trying to get something done to help out his solo laner, just get some Bastion damage instead.
That could have ended really poorly for Alfie, although that lifesteal would have come in handy had that fight turned into one like this one over in duo lane that may just lead to the end of Kakashi. The dueling dragons come out and land, but are just barely not enough damage as Kakashi escapes with the tiniest portion of health. Had that fight gone on longer, that may have traded in favor of Underworld, though, as East was also getting extremely low on health. So that may have been a blessing in disguise that Kakashi had managed to escape there, because I don't think you want to be on the side that loses the ADC in that trade.
Yeah, definitely not a role in the ADC that you want to fall behind on because of how impactful they can be in late game. So it worked out there for both squads to keep their ADCs alive. With a bit of a pause here, we have a chance to look at some of these builds, which are seeming fairly standard across the board. We see Doom Orb following the Vampiric Shroud for both Rosie and Alfie on their respective picks. Both of them heading into that Enchanted Spear tree. Seems like they might just be saying, "Hey, what if we built the same thing together, just to be good friends?"
Friendship, my friends, because, you know, the real Smite was the friends that we made along the way. Also, what I'm
Exactly.
guessing to be a Stone of Binding being built second by Ordered here.
Yeah, I
So,
would imagine so. That's a good item on the Nox because of how much CC that Nox has. You're proccing that quite a bit. 7.5% of protections getting stripped away. Kind of becomes a damage item in certain builds, and it will just help the entirety of Underworld do more damage to anybody that Ordered Mess on this Nox decide to focus.
we also see the Transcendence starting to stack quite nicely in the face of the pressure Alfie is bringing with that pick on the Hades. So, could definitely be in a worse position if you are Shinigami here right now, as well as the Rage getting ever closer. Although the Rage Curse may be inflicted on Freyr, you know, we see occasionally in competitive Smite. You build a Rage, you pop off beforehand, you build the Rage, and then suddenly, next thing you know, kills aren't happening anywhere near you. And it's never a good feeling. What is a good feeling is zooming around the map like you've got a certain character from a certain other game on your back with all the move speed that those katanas provide, like we're seeing come out of Kami right now.
Yeah, we've seen a shift in Bakasura builds away from the crit because of the changes to Spectral, instead going for an attack speed penetration orientated build setup. That seems to be where Kami is deciding to take this so far. I imagine that is going to be like a serrated edge coming out of him second there before heading into something like the chin size or the uh, Odysseus bow that we see so often built on characters like Bakasura and Kali.
We also see different relics coming out of the junglers as well. This in particular is something I don't notice as much personally, just out of the fact that I play more than I watch of Smite. We see the blink coming out of Kami, but the beads coming out of Freyr. A lot of times you'll see in organized play a lot of blink just coming out on so many junglers. And so I tend to not take notice of that when it doesn't happen, because a lot of times what you'll see in your own games, even toward the lower end high ranks, you'll see safer picks into higher CC comps or more impactful CC comps, especially if you're planning on ganking those lanes, which seems to be the mentality here.
Yeah, there's just so much impactful CC on the side of Goosedra that Beads is a good call as we hop back into the action here. I mean, you have the Yamoja stuns that can come out being sent to Niflheim by Lockheed that you have to worry about. Regurgitate with the incredible slow that it brings, and even like the Tiger stun coming out of Shinigami. There's lots of things where you would want that Beads. So I don't mind him picking that up here in that first relic slot. He can always pick up the Blink at level 12.
And Yamoja's bouncing bubbles aren't the biggest slow either, but they are another slow, and when you're a melee character, every move speed point counts. That Rage now being completed as well. Hopefully for Freyr and for Underworld, you don't want that curse to come in. Usually doesn't, but those games it does never feel good. If he's around for those kills, he should come online sooner. Bit of poking happening in solo lane. Shinigami has to play a little safer, dropping the ultimate, but you need to be careful engaging against Hades, and he is choosing, it looks like, to just play a bit of a poking game, as Alfie is able to back up with minimal damage, and even less once this next wave arrives.
Yeah, for Freyr, this is kind of like the prime moment. You might not have a ton of crit chance stacked up because you don't have any stacks on those Rage, nor do you have any other items, but nobody on the side of Goosedra has picked up Spectral, and it doesn't look like anybody's building into it for their next item, as I imagine it's a Gauntlet of Thieves. But the Regurgitate will interrupt my thought as East is just deleted by Kami, showing that early pressure ability once you have Regurgitating that Golden Blade on, which will lead to a Gold Fury pull by Goosedra here over on the left-hand side.
Yeah, it was definitely a strong gank coming out of Kami. East tried to survive with the blind, but unfortunately Kami was just too close, and even if he hadn't been, those katanas, that katana tree, as well as Bloodforge, give you so much movement speed when built in multiples. It's not the largest amount to have 7%, but it's not insignificant, and 7 on 7 on 7 just starts to stack more and more and more. Also, you can't just hide behind your minions. Sure, the Golden Blade AoE autos only deal half damage, but they still deal damage, and it's a lot you need to be careful of, as well as this Yamoja being out of Omi being something you have to be careful of. A little far up, looking to potentially take those oracles. No, that's low health. Playing very far back, trying to support where he can, but it doesn't look like he's going to get too much going. River's Rebuke is going to trap one in Rosie, who is now, oh, I'm sorry, in Ordered. I was looking at the wrong health bar, who will go down as Rosie does get away. Very unfortunate position to be in for anyone on the team, but much better to lose your support in that situation for sure.
Yeah, it seemed like Underworld wanted to take that fight. They were consistently baiting, but it took too long that there was rotations out. A good self managed to get away from the Regurgitate, even opting to land back on top of Kami, but that'll cost Rosie their life. Now on the run is Freyr on this Mercury's home sweet home. Damage was getting channeled through T1 Tower, though. Falls over in solo lane. Shinigami unable to defend that one from the pressure that Alfie on this Hades can bring.
But due to the lack of teleport, there is a window where a lot of damage could be dealt by Shinigami onto that tower, just like a lot of damage could have been dealt by the ADCs to each other, but nothing to come of that. Shinigami opting to take those bastions first and foremost. That is quite a bit of gold if you are able to get those down. Later in the game, they become a bit less of a concern, but also simultaneously much easier to kill, so not sure if those will end up coming up later or if they'll just get skipped if that tower is standing, but getting now guarantees that you're getting that gold and not worrying about getting through too quickly, especially in a slower lane like solo.
Definitely
A bit going on in the duo lane, but nothing will come of it thanks to those Heimdall crystals, allowing you to go a pretty solid distance safely.
Yeah, Freyr committed the Mercury ult there to try and get that kill. Looks like beads and the crystal was required, but it does mean that Loki gets to get out. It slows the damage potential of this Mercury of Freyr down just a little bit, though. With the blink in, Regurgitate from Bakasura could spell even more trouble. Home Sweet Home used as well. Damage getting thrown out towards Rosie, but it's not quite enough. And here is Freyr on this Mercury doing quite a bit of damage, forces out the Aegis and the beads from Baba Yaga with the help of Ordered Mess. No one ends up falling, but relics and ultimates used on both sides in mass in that mid fight.
On the note of relics, I do want to mention as well that with the ADCs hitting level 12, Loki was able to get there first, and not only did that cost beads, it also cost Aegis Amulet, and attempting to take that fight with the Hades ultimate is going to result in Alfie's own death. Those are making a very strong ultimate, especially when you have the lifesteal of a Vampiric Shroud and Polynomicon, but just not quite enough into Shinigami, getting tons of extra stacks on that Soul Eater, which is now over half stacked.
Amy with another
Lot of
rotation.
danger. Lot of damage coming out onto East. Thankfully, still has the tier 1 to run back underneath, but now potentially having to fight Kami and Loki, who are now both waiting in the wings. Loki steps up a bit too much, takes a little bit of extra damage. Rosie now trying to not get poked out. Maybe back safely. Looks like you're gonna be able to get away with that as the fight dissipates.
Taking a look at Kami's build, I was wrong about where he's headed with this one. It was the Hasten Katana pickup, and now has that short sword going into the crit tree. Is this Bakasura? Both junglers deciding, you know what, Spectral, not that important. We can just do it as Gold Fury's already down to half. Underworld trying to secure this one. Goosedra step up, and Goosedra steal at a good cudgel out of the Sun Wukong, but can they win the fight on the back end?
That hesitation on objectives, not even remotely a thing. Suddenly, we've traded. Kami goes down, Alfie goes down. Ordered left on low health, but everyone else is going to be able to get away. Now a lot of pressure in the mid lane if they choose, but they're gonna back away. Look at this Pyromancer take. Doesn't look like a lot's going to be contested. Ordered Rosie trying to step up with Freyr right there with them. River's Rebuke comes out onto Ordered, who gets rooted, but not enough to either of them, as both of them fairly tanky right now. Cloak stacking pretty nicely, as well as Mask having just really solid mitigation overall. We're level 11, so we are almost seeing out of Ordered, that's what, 11.75% damage mitigation?
Yeah, it's a bringing a lot is that Protector's Mask for Ordered Mess at the moment, able to live through Pyromancer not ending up getting dropped either way, but Goosedra probably okay with that. That was a great steal from Shinigami on the Sun Wukong to make sure that that objective went their way, because it looked like Underworld were going to get that one for relatively free. The solo lane rotation secures that gold and experience globally to his squad.
Following the Polynomicon and Vampiric Shroud start, we are going to see a lifesteal item get built by the Hades of Alfie here. So, curious to see where exactly that goes. Lots of fun stuff you can do in the Talon Trinket tree, all of which provide lifesteal. I'm highly doubting that it's going to be a Pythagoras piece, but I mean, hey, I've seen weirder I've seen Anubis and Artemis played as supports in SPL before, okay? One Pythagoras piece doesn't seem like the weirdest thing I've seen. But realistically, it's probably going to either be Bancrofts or Typhons, as those are the generally dominant items of the tree for most. As the Pyromancer goes down, Rosie and Order take a lot of damage over there, just trying to get out alive. Using that Ascension is just barely enough, and that is not going to feel good if you're Shinigami, who really doesn't feel good about it. Running through the tower now. Freyr trying to do things alone in mid lane. Shinigami has now been shot by 2 different towers multiple times each. Lost a lot of health. Wolfie able to get out safely. Rosie also able to get out safely. Ordered still sticking around despite that low health bar, and they are going to get Kakashi thanks to the spinning stun from Freyr. That spin, he just goes, there's spin to win in every game, isn't there?
It really is. It's another stack of rage online for Freyr. And you know, I spent all that time talking about how Spectral makes crit so hard to work, how I don't like the Mercury, I wouldn't want the Bakasura to go that way. But if nobody builds Spectral armor, crit still does crit things. As Shinigami trapped behind 2 here trying to make it up. Wukong's pretty safe. Looks like they might be waiting for that bird form to interrupt. It is the go button, and that is danger for Shinigami, who will fall to the death from below from Hades. That dash getting the kill, always a fun way to do it. But the blink in regurgitate onto East could spell trouble. Good Aegis and the Rising Jaguar to get out, but he will fall. The tower though,
But Kami will
get a kill.
go down. Oh no! Still a lot of value out of that. A lot of pressure comes out of that, but now you're the team that's down 2 players on map, and that is going to hurt. Now seeing Ordered trying to poke around a little bit, trying to secure the purple buff for East, but not going to go quite their way. River's Rebuke comes out, trapping no one, just a little too late to catch either of the potential targets. One thing that I wanted to mention earlier in Gold Fury that slipped my mind and that you reminded me of again after we saw the boomerang from Kami is that there is a build philosophy amongst some players that Spectral Armor isn't worth building. Others will argue that you should be building Spectral every time there's crit. The reason you'll see this argument is that some people feel the time you get out of Spectral Armor surviving from that reduced crit damage doesn't end up changing much in a lot of situations. Whereas some people will counterpoint that with, even if that's true, some situations it will help. And then the situations where it does help, it is insanely useful. Whereas on the other side of the coin, there are people who argue, no, it does do enough. You just need to play correctly into crit, even with Spectral Armor.
I feel like that was the argument, and I agreed with both sides. I could see both sides before Spectral was changed recently in one of the more recent patches, but now it's just a great item regardless of crit. It brings good protections and good utility, and then once you get crit, you have that aura of crit decreased damage to help your backline, as well as getting extra power. It just brings so much. I'd love to see someone here or pick it up here, but Fire Giant might get traded out for Gold Fury, as Goosedra want to pick the biggest map on the objective up.
I think that Gold Fury was a bit more value. Underworld going to be able to secure both anyway, although it will cost them Alfie. Now on the escape, hitting the root from Ordered, but he is going to get hit with that Regurgitate. Trapped by the Bakasura of Kami going down. Looking really, really rough for these two over in mid lane. Big River's Rebuke comes out. Suddenly, everyone's going down. Freyr's dead. Under Phoenix, we see Rosie getting chased. Not a lot looking to come of that in the very end. Meanwhile, East with the split push. But can that pressure be matched compared to 5 people on the other side? It absolutely can, and that Gold Fury side Phoenix. Long term, if you keep it down, is more important. But right now, it doesn't matter. What matters is that a Phoenix went down. That gold side only matters if Fire Giant's up, and, well, that split push only happened because Fire went down.
It's such interesting... That's the second time we've seen something like that happen. The Fire Giant gets taken away by Underworld while at the same time East is split pushing. This seems like it's a plan that Underworld have had, that they've worked on and want to play in this style. And it worked out for them there because they steal that Fire Giant. They had already gotten the Gold Fury and they get a Phoenix. While there were some kills on, going the way of Goosedra and they got that mid bird, definitely losing out in that trade. And it makes the gold lead stay relatively even. It's about 60, or it's about 2,000 or so between these two squads, 1866 to be exact, which leads to neither side really having the ability to siege here, though as I say that, Merc ults into this and trying to start up a fight in mid lane.
Potentially looking for that tier 1 tower. It is still standing at 23 minutes. Not going to feel good. Just trying to eat a lot of cooldowns from Goosedra, and it looks like they've succeeded, but if you don't capitalize quickly enough, those non-ultimates aren't going to matter. They'll come right back up. Big stun onto Ordered, and it does look like he's going to get out. Shinigami used his ultimate. His clone did a lot of damage. The Regurgitate coming out of Kami, but just not quite going to be enough. Is going to be able to leap over the wall and get out. You now have 3 low health players on the Goosedra side. It's looking more and more like this Phoenix is going to go down. You do have to remember, if they're not quick enough, Kakashi can just keep throwing those heals out. Down goes the tower. East just says, it's okay. I can juggle myself in and out and just whack the tower myself. And so he does.
There's something we saw in game 1, I believe, or maybe it was game 2, that X-Ball is one of the only, if not the only god in the game that can hit an objective like a tower or a Phoenix from outside of the range that you normally can. The other gods that have extended autos like Ishtar and Hachiman specifically do not let you do that, but Darkest Night giving East those extended autos, he could, if he needs to, pop that ultimate just to be able to hit something like a Phoenix or a tower from outside of the normal range, which is really hard to kind of play against if East continues to split push like he has been so much in these past few games.
One thing that has been interesting is we haven't seen as much aggression coming out of Kakashi on this Yemoja pick. I know Yemoja's not, as aggressive as Horus, but I'm a little bit surprised with how, when it worked, and I'm not sure if they just didn't want to chance it not working, or if they have another reason for not having Kakashi play that aggressive, because Yemoja's not incapable on the offensive.
Definitely not.
Around Fire Giant as well. Little bit's gonna come of that, but not a lot. Ooh, and the bonk onto East, the Riptide to bring him back, and the Regurgitate comes out. Down goes the carry of Underworld. Now in a 5v4 positioned around this Fire Giant. It looks like they're hungry. They want this thing. They want to eat those rocks. They are well cooked, and you do not want them to burn, and they think they're about to burn. So here's the take, but they are going to back off as they do see the contesting coming from it. Let those rocks cook a little more, You can let them get a little crispy. You just don't want them to burn.
Yeah, they will lose the left side Phoenix once again. I agree. I don't know if I agree with that call. I feel like you could have just taken the fight, and you could see Freyr on this Mercury over there in that left lane. You knew they were going to try and pressure out that Phoenix again. Just take the Fire Giant, because now they lost their window of opportunity as a big ult from Freyr comes through and gets the beads from Kami. They lost their window, but it seems like they're trying to make their own with a good Ruber's Rebuke.
Indeed, and down will go Rosie to Wolfie, and oh my goodness, that chase never stopped. Mercury, they say he's hard to catch, but that means he's also hard to escape. Kami does go down. Pyromancer also getting taken by Locky, but nope. Alfie looked close, but he didn't end up going in to grab it. Now looking like he's just waiting for a take to start on Fire Giant, just clearing those wards and now backing Fire Giant, not looking to be pulled right now.
Member down on both sides, mid and jungle respectively, between Underworld and Goosedra. Kind of just means that neither feels completely confident stepping into this Fire Giant pit. The mid Phoenix, though, has respawned for Underworld, which will make it easier for them to step up to this Fire Giant without the fear fire minions pouring into their base. Left side Phoenix on the side of Goosedra was taken again with the help of Freyr on the Mercury as we step into a quick pause. So that is the hardest one to defend while boxing around the Fire Giant. We can see Shinigami at the moment pushing out those waves to allow them to be ready for this biggest objective on the map. 2 minutes away from it being enhanced. If these teams decide to dance around for a little bit more, continue taking these fights in the jungle, we could see it tick over to its upgraded version before it gets dropped here.
Yeah, I think that if I'm either of these teams, but especially if I'm Underworld, I would want this to tick to enhanced before we take it. Of course, if the other team gets low and you have the chance to steal, you definitely want to go for that. But not only is it going to be enhanced in 2 minutes, in just over 1 minute, that Bracer is going to be back up. And that is an incredibly powerful relic. It gives you power, move speed, and those two things are both incredibly valuable. It's only on a 100-second cooldown, You know what's on less than 100-second cooldown is that Regurgitate. I might be wrong about those numbers, but I am not wrong when I say that Kami goes down to the Pillars of Agony. And that's going to be really unfortunate. In goes Alfie with a bit more aggression on the Hades. Is going to go down. Not enough sustain in spite of the Typhon's Fang Polynomicon and that Shroud, which is now also upgraded. So now we're going to see a chase come out. River's Rebuke isn't going to land on anyone or trap anyone in. Underworld now has that Fire Giant. You don't care as much that your solo laner, even a damaged solo laner like Hades, doesn't have it. Definitely something that went their way in the end. The only downside, the only thing you're not particularly happy about is we didn't have Enhanced, but you can get that again in 4 minutes.
Aggression in from Freya here, gets the beads out of Wolfie on the Baba Yaga, but does manage to make it back safely to the tower. Looks like we might see the first proper siege here of game 3 as Underworld step up towards this mid lane. It looks like, as I say that, they will prove me wrong and move towards this Primal Fury instead. Siege defense out of Goosedra is not bad. You have the Baba Yaga, who's pretty far into the build now as we're almost 30 minutes into this game. Has good wave clear, good amount of safety, but it does make it a bit harder for Kami to do what he wants to do, especially with this movement speed and crit build. There's not a lot of positioning you're kind of afforded when you're standing underneath a tower or underneath a Phoenix. So it'll kind of inhibit what he truly wants to do, but I don't think the Goosedra have too hard of a time defending against what Underworld have.
Well, and if Kami can stay out of sight as well, what you end up doing is leaving him the ability to flank. Of course, there will probably be wards, they'll be watching their sides, but you can't watch everything. And if your attention's pulled and you know that the enemy's attention's pulled, you have the ability to jump over walls, drop that Regurgitate, and with all of that movement speed, you can do that from a little away and come in from the side or behind and just start dealing tons of damage to one of the carries of the enemy side. Looks like we are going to see a ton of damage come out onto Kakashi. There's some of that aggression that I was looking for being far up at just not a good time, and it looks like he is going to struggle to escape. He is going to hit the stun, throw out the River's Rebuke, get sucked in by the Pillars of Agony in the end, and go down. Although that did take an ultimate to pull off, that's still something that's going to help a lot. That Yamoja, so much CC, hard CC and soft CC, as well as those heals and the shields that come with that River's Rebuke. All of them so impactful, and you now don't have any of these staring down for people with Fire Giant buff, with a Bracer down on their side, as well as that Hades, who even without Fire Giant buff, just so much damage out of that god. So much damage to be careful of.
Yeah, Kakashi brings quite a bit as the shell is popped preemptively as they step into this Phoenix here. Phoenix will end up falling as Freyr gets a kill onto Wolfie. Shinigami in a lot of trouble, forced up onto the cloud, but it seems like Underworld are just going to back up. They got their Phoenix, mostly because of that pick onto Kakashi. As you mentioned, Yamoja is so good on Phoenix defenses, even just the ability to throw up the River's Rebuke sideways and block off the ability for the ADC to auto-attack it can just buy so much time and set up for your defense. So Kakashi getting picked there, not exactly what Goosedra was hoping to have happen. But I do like that Kakashi has picked up the Spectral Armor. I've been talking about it all game. We finally have one here, which will help so much against what Freyr on this Mercury is going to be able to bring. But the thing is that Aura, it doesn't cover the whole map. It's only if you're within 55 units. So Kakashi needs to group up with their squad and make sure that this item is doing what it's intended to do to try and keep his backliners alive. If he gets caught out like that a couple more times, it could just spell the end, because without Spectral, Hydra's crits coming from Freya is going to just absolutely melt anybody that gets in his way.
Especially with Mercury having access to an ability that can crit. They hit so much harder than your standard autos. It's so devastating. We also see Freyr being the first one to sell Golden Blade in favor of that Serrated Edge. Lots of penetration, pretty modest amount of power, keeps the move speed. Definitely a strong item, especially here in the late game. What's also strong is River's Rebuke and Regurgitate coming out onto the same targets, going to lead to the death of Alfie. Despite his best efforts to stay alive, Kakashi, though, losing a bit of health. Goosedra now playing defensive. I don't think they're forced on the defensive, and we see they're not, as we see Locky gets a kill onto Rosie, who really did try to get away with that leap into the air, but it just wasn't enough. Now really playing from behind Underworld as Goosedra think about starting this Fire Giant. It's not the safest Fire Giant, but if you're too picky, you'll just end up having to fight for it all over again. So now we just have a few members playing defense, while the rest on Fire Giant. 3 chances to steal from 3 different angles. They go in, they throw absolutely everything. They are not able to take it, and both teams will back off. Goosedra having the enhanced Fire Giant for the first time in Game 3. Oh, and the Mercury of Freyr is able to get the kill onto Locky. Tons and tons and tons of damage on those Hydra's crits. You have Hydra's crits, ability crits, and all of that adds up so fast.
It definitely does. And when Locky misses that ultimate and is unable, uses that safety and or no longer has that safety, I guess I should say, makes it pretty easy pickings for Freyr on there. And that's a big pick. This is an enhanced Fire Giant. We're 35 minutes into this game. There's a lot you can do with that pickup, but now not having an ADC to make use of that EFG will really slow down the siege potential of Goosedra. They do still have the Bakasura, who will swing pretty hard against the objectives in his own right, but losing Locky is an important pick for the side of Underworld, and it seems like they're trying to wait and set up a little bit of a trap over here, knowing that Goosedra needs to clear out these fire waves and that it would probably be a good lane to siege down. But Goosedra took their time and probably unknowingly survived what could have been a pretty good ambush coming out of Underworld.
We're also going to see one of my favorite types of items that exists in Smite, and those are supportive power items. I'm a big fan of that design space personally, and I love seeing situations where things like Gem of Isolation and Ethereal Staff, either of which could be the build here, get built. I love the items. I love what they do. I love that they provide power and are supportive, and either of them could go quite a long way. The negative CDR that we see on Kakashi on Ethereal Staff, on... I got mixed up there. The health and mana stealing of the Ethereal Staff we see on Kakashi goes a massive way in terms of giving yourself options, taking them away. Gem of Isolation's negative CDR is just incredible. Almost as incredible as where that River's Rebuke could have gone if not for that tiny little space left open. So nothing will come of it, but a lot of health lost by Rosie and East, who are going to be able to make it back to their fountain as Kakashi gets chased out. Kami, though, as the whole team is there, is able to get the last hit onto Freyr, now leaving you 2 Phoenixes and a Mercury down. Not a good position to be in, but you do know there are no objectives, and by the time there is one, you will be well, we have Pyromancer, but by the time there's one of those major objectives, not that Pyromancer's low impact by any means, you are going to have your whole team up and ready to defend.
Yeah, Freyr did get that left side Phoenix once again, really focusing the split pushing our Underworld. Either it's East or it's Freyr who are making sure that the kind of structures are going down on the side of Goosedra at all times, but they trade out 2 Phoenixes for it. And notably, it is a left side Phoenix that falls on the side of Underworld as well, so those fire minions will end up crashing to kind of mitigate what Freyr did to get that left side Phoenix, but at the same time, it will also make it easier for them as Underworld to defend that left side Phoenix for this next Fire Giant, which will be spawning in around 15 seconds. But Goosedra still have the advantage here. They still have the better map state, and looks like they are getting that aggressive vision and positioning around this Fire Giant pit, trying to set themselves up to get what could be the last Fire Giant of the game.
Now, before things break out, I just got to drop this one because I thought of it. So We're seeing Underworld split push a lot, yes?
Yeah.
Would you say that it's a, especially with Mercury doing it, critical part of their game plan? Big River's Rebuke coming out just next to the Fire Giant, and it does look like East is going down to that, and its follow-up, indeed they will. It's the only kill they have, but a lot of damage on to Rosie. And now looking confident enough to start this Fire Giant. If this goes their way, especially from this position, this is a very simple end. Maybe not the easiest thing in the world, but it's not going to be an incredibly Herculean task. Plenty of steal potential will not pay off, and now suddenly you're just way farther up than you want to be. But that critical game plan, once again coming out of Freyr, going after the Phoenix, will get the Phoenix, but has to back out. You need to be careful from this position, because if they get too far up, and only Ordered and Rosie are there at the base, that Titan goes down.
They're just going for an
so
end.
quickly. Freyr is going to back. They are looking to end this here and now, but down goes Shinigami and Locky to Rosie. Fantastic play, but down goes Rosie. Suddenly now, 3v2, a lot of chase potential. If Freyr is able to get a lot of damage onto Kami, this is potential for another kill. What you have to be careful of chasing is the health that can be provided by Kakashi on that Yamoja pick. If he chooses to heal his team, it becomes a lot harder to secure these kills, and their health bars are just going up and up and up. You need to be careful with how you push this aggression here, and walk the line as closely as possible between counter pushing and overextending.
I don't really agree with the call that Goosedra made there. They saw that Freyr was getting that mid Phoenix and they decided to try and go for an end, but they didn't quite have the damage there, when, especially since there's still a tier 2 tower up in solo, which gives those extra protections to the Titan, making it harder to drop down. They could have just tried to, clear the rest of the structures, get that T2 tower, get that right side Phoenix, and leave the base completely ripped open on the side of Underworld. But instead they go for the kind of bold play of stepping up into that Titan room, and it was a huge ult out of Freyr, hitting multiple members of Goosedra to completely negate that push. They were able to get picks on the back of it, and then just wasted time chasing out the remaining members of Goosedra, kind of eliminating a lot of time on their EFG. But with rotations getting spotted out by Freyr, it seems like Goosedra are trying to collapse on this Mercury, but he's just too fast to catch.
Goosedra also left behind in structures, now the only ones without a Phoenix, and both tier 2s in solo now still standing. So that play, not only did it backfire, not only did they lose a fight, they've now lost all of the pressure that they've built up in terms of objectives. Sure, they're low health, but they're standing. Those fire waves aren't coming up anymore, and that's going to make these sieges a lot harder. Seems like they're going for it anyway. Shinigami goes in, goes for the bonk, but ends up having to burn the ultimate, not confident that he can survive without hopping up onto that cloud. But now, suddenly, caught out in the backline is Freyr. Big Riptide comes out. River's Rebuke comes out at nothing? I assume that was a read that just didn't go as planned, but you are still in an advantage not having to deal with someone as powerful as Mercury on this defense. Looking like Kami might be going for a split push to the other side, but Rosie sees that, reads that, and is ready. So instead of a 5v4, you're now looking at a 4v3 here in the mid lane, while left side is being defended safely. Confident that Kami is either backing off or just looking for proper flanks. Rosie's a little more willing to play the poke game around that mid Phoenix. It's taking just little bits and pieces of poke damage anywhere they can get them in, but it doesn't look like anything major is coming of it yet.
The tanks have stepped into this Phoenix and tanked it up, but we haven't seen any of the backliners do damage to this Phoenix yet, which is still right around the same HP as it was before. Probably waiting for the split push here out of Kami on this Bakasura, but Rosie's wave clear is just too strong, unable to do it. Pillars of Agony, though, pulls in a few, getting landed on, but
straight
Wolfie
into
will
the
get
Pillars
the
of Agony. Youch. And that is, that's not a good feeling kill if you're Alfie there. You're feeling like the star. You've got this massive ultimate, and you just get jumped on by an old lady, and suddenly you're dead. So Very unfortunate. And they lose the Phoenix as well. It's just not a good position to be in, practically or mentally. And now everyone's looking at this Fire Giant, and Gold Fury both up. FG definitely being more impactful at the almost 44-minute mark. Looking like this game actually going to be even longer than game 2.
Yeah, it already
Potential
is.
for a big stun.
Freyr is split pushing once again on this Mercury. Will not be here for this Fire Giant fight as River's Rebuke gets thrown out. Fire Giant seeming to be leashed as Shinigami will get a pick onto East, and Kami wants to get aggressive onto Rosie. Can he get the kill once this Yu Huang lands, decides to back up for the moment. Low health bars on the side of Goosedra will force them to back up, mostly because Freyr once again is split pushing, gets that mid Phoenix, so could be Fire Giant traded out.
I think that if they're not able to get Fire Giant on the Goosedra side, this is the one time where that split push was uncontested the correct thing to do. But that hinges on being able to steal it or Goosedra messing up their take. Doesn't look like their steal potential's looking strong, though. Rosie, despite the leap, not going to be able to get away from Shinigami, who did once again burn ultimate. Another powerful regurgitate comes out of Kami as well. That's not fantastic. They now have the Fire Giant and are now sieging 5v2. So suddenly, Freyr getting that split push looks a lot less valuable. Now, we're looking at a tank that needs his ultimate up, which it is, to be able to tank, but also needs to be able to hit those big AoE ults and not take a ton of damage himself, along with Freyr, who now goes down, and down goes the Hades. Suddenly, everything looks bad. East not going to have the damage, almost surely. And down goes the Titan. The set does end up going in favor of Goosedra after 3 incredible games that could have gone either way at so many different points. Those split pushes just kept being so awkward.
Yeah, the split pushing is definitely the thing to focus on there for the end of the game. Goosedra get that win. And to me, it's a lot because Freyr was so insistent on pushing down those structures. There were times, as you mentioned, it was a great call. I like seeing that split pushing happening from time to time. He got a bunch of free Phoenixes, set up for things. But there were moments like at the end there where he was so focused on doing nothing but split pushing. 5 members were walking and trying to get that EFG, and he was off getting a mid Phoenix that was already low and wasn't really that impactful. Ends up costing his team the game, unable to help out in that fight in the jungle pit. And then it's just so hard to defend against 5 people with EFG with just 2 members when we're about 50 minutes into the game. So unfortunate prioritization coming out of Underworld allows Goosedra to just focus on their own game plan and get that set win.
Yeah, Alfie not even able to get that ultimate off at the end that I was talking about to be able to tank. It led to me not being able to finish my point as the game ended. This was a set where everything just went 0 to 100. We saw nothing happening, and then someone just jumped. And in the end, we saw a bit more jumping come out of one side. We also saw 32 wards come out of Ordered Mess. Very big number, very funny, tons of vision.
Yeah, good support play coming out of Ordered Mess in all 3 games, unable to get the set win. But Goosedra do take that win, which will move them up the chart here in this division, pumping them up to 4th place, with Underworld getting dropped down to 5th now, below their opponents.
Well, hey, I said at the start of the set that they were 1 away from being on opposite ends of the board, and now they're on opposite ends of the board.
Yeah.
So
Working out in Goosedra's favor. They finally got that set win. They were close to taking it last week, but unfortunately unable to do so. Finally get a win under their belts here in week 2.
You'd rather be close to losing and take a win than be close to winning and take a loss. There are definitely things both sides can take away from this going into their next sets. Again, there was the aggression out of Kakashi that was really strong when it worked. And if you can coordinate around that, it ends up being really strong. But we saw those situations across all 3 games where it just times that it didn't. Times that on this Yamoja pick, it was just way too far up, no one around. And I understand the idea of I'm tanky, I can go up and ward, but you have to understand that there is a limit, especially right now when tanks are not completely squishy, but squishier than you'd like them to be. Even with those mitigations, you've got to be careful when you're going up to do things like that, because if you get caught out, especially by a group team, which you should expect, you're going up around an objective, you end up losing out. And then sometimes, and it didn't end up happening this game, but sometimes that leads to sieges just going very, very poorly. Thankfully, that wasn't a game end off of that, although it could have been earlier in the game.
Yeah, there's definitely a limit, a line when it comes to aggression, something that everyone, needs to learn how to kind of walk that line. Kakashi no different than the rest of us. This early in the season, it's only week 2, lots of time for both of these squads to kind of fine tune their identity as a team, fine tune how they want to play and try to work their way through the season here in the middle division. So exciting prospects for both sides, as that was definitely a back and forth game that either squad could have taken at any moment.
Fantastic set through and through. I'm so glad to have been here to cast this one with you.
100%. Well,
All right.
I think that
do
will do
believe
us for here as we both try to sign off at the same time. I think that's a
chaos is fun.
good marker of the fact that we are gonna wrap it up here. That was a win for Goosedra. A great set between these two. I have been Dr. Shrew, joined by Sunset with Soul Slaw on the Spectator. Thanks so much for hanging out here on the GSL. We will definitely be back with more games in the future. There's one tomorrow at 7 p.m. BST. Definitely don't want to miss out on that one.
They say that life's too short to be holding this tight. So why am I walking light? And in this world of light and color, I'm not afraid of the night. When this future's so bright, yeah, I got all these friends and we're like, it's not the end. Whoa, this new world is ours. This new world is ours, and all these friends, and we're like, it's not the end. Whoa, this new world is ours. This new world is ours. This new world is ours. They say that life's too short, and I can feel